reborn in Modern Family as Iron Man. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you want to support us and get exclusive content, Ko-Fi is your happy place. Chapter 101, The Unreadable Frog and the Todd Ink Brawl Mystery. Colonel Banks gazed intently at the frog, his eyes narrowing as he tried to read the creature's expression. After a few moments of silence, he finally spoke, his voice low and measured. I have a lot of questions for you. The frog's response was an eerie cackle, its throat pulsing with a sound. It tilted its head, fixing the colonel with a glassy stare from its beady eyes. I can imagine, it said. Colonel Banks wasn't one to beat around the bush. Did you kill the boy, or did he accept the offer? The frog's cackling continued, bubbling up from its throat in a manic stream. The boy rejected the offer, it said at last. So he's dead, the colonel said, almost nonchalantly, as he began to walk again, forgetting about the boy in a flash. But there was a dark glint in his maroon eye, a hint of something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. Now tell me about the being in red. Is that another Todd Ink Brawl that the boy created? The frog shook its head, its cackling abruptly halting. No, it said simply. The colonel stopped walking and turned to face the frog, his eyes boring into the creature like two gleaming daggers. Speak clearly, Colonel Banks said in a low voice that brooked no argument. The frog, seemingly intimidated, stepping back slightly as it stopped cackling and spoke. That red being you're speaking of, was the bow, it was gonna say, its voice barely above a whisper as before it could say more. A thick black tentacle-like appendage smashed into the frog's body. For a split second, it looked as though the creature would be crushed, but then its body morphed into a cloud of dust that was there on the table, the tentacle hitting nothing and completely missing, causing it be swung around the room. When the frog magically reappeared in physical form, it began cackling loudly, as if it found the whole situation amusing. Seems you're angry, it said, its voice tinged with glee. The colonel's anger was palpable, his hands still trembling from their earlier transformation into tentacles as the tentacles reverted back to normal human-looking hands. You had one job, he spat. Kill the boy or make him stop. And you failed to do even that. The colonel's mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. The boy has tricks up his sleeve I never saw coming, the frog muttered to Colonel Banks. You saw what he was capable of building. He actually had a chance of survival against me. The colonel's eyes were filled with determination and seriousness as he looked towards the frog's beady eyes perched on the desk. We can't let the boy create more Todd Ink Bras, he said firmly. There are already enough Todd Ink Bras running around and causing chaos all over the world. The frog nodded quietly, its eyes flashing with disagreement, but it remained silent. Variation for P2. The frog's eyes glimmered with hidden thoughts as it stared at the colonel, its body as still as a statue. The frog simply nodded in agreement. The frog's eyes, however, reflected a hint of dissent that Colonel Banks was unaware of. The frog felt that Colonel Banks' statement was absolutely nonsensical considering the fact that Colonel Banks himself was a Todd Ink Bra. The frog remained silent, however, not showing its discontentment with Colonel Banks. Colonel Banks turned his sharp gaze towards the frog, his voice taking on a threatening tone. Has the Wendigo been secured at least? Do not tell me that you failed to secure the Wendigo, he said with a sense of urgency. The frog let out another cackle, enjoying the emotions being exuded by Colonel Banks, which seemed to irritate Colonel Banks even more. You don't need to be worried, the Wendigo is secured and will soon be transported to the main lair, the frog replied, its voice laced with amusement. The colonel simply nodded, deciding to ignore the frog's mocking. It's of utmost importance that the boy does not create any more Todd Ink Bras, the colonel reiterated, his voice stern. It was a task given to you, and you will make sure to complete it. If you can't kill the boy, that's fine. I don't care about the effectiveness of your abilities against the boy. Make sure that there are no more new tankers popping up due to him. Okay, the frog said simply as its body started disintegrating into fine dust impossible to see by the normal human eyes, and the dust flew out of the open windows, completely disappearing from sight by using the sun's bright light to disguise itself completely. Colonel Banks saw the empty desk where the frog was perched and then had silently disappeared without a trace. He felt frustrated about his current situation where he felt tied down and unable to really do much. But he quickly forgot about it and went to sit down on his chair, muttering about how he could easily kill the human if he wasn't stuck in his current mission. James was feeling overwhelmed with the complexity of the situation. A system that doesn't make any sense, he thought to himself, scratching his head. I would know it if I saw 4 Todink bras, but I have only ever seen 2, the frog and the Wendigo. Wait? Is this related to what that frog Todink bra was talking about? He thought in his head, directed the question to the system. He was curious to find out about what the frog had mentioned, and now that the system also said something like this, his curiosity turned into anxiousness to find out the answer. Chapter 102, The Price of Knowledge and the 4th Todink bra. Impatience gripped me as I waited for the system to respond, but after a few seconds of silence, I prompted it to answer as I asked it again. System, who are the 4 Todink bras that you have identified, the Wendigo and the frog? The system's monotone voice echoed in my mind, finally responding to my question. Were among the Todink bras that have been personally identified by you. Unfortunately, the 3rd Todink bra could not be fully identified by the system, so its identity remains a mystery currently, but its existence is now exposed. You said 4, that was only 3, I said, hoping for it to continue. Went quiet for a few seconds and waited in silence, hoping for the system to continue with the information I wanted. But instead, the system remained silent, frustrating me. What about the 4th Todink bra? I spoke, feeling annoyed at the fact that I had to repeat myself multiple times to get an answer from this system. I felt my frustration grow as the system's voice echoed in my mind. The system has determined that you are not strong enough to access that information. My annoyance was palpable at this discovery as I retorted, what? Come on. So when will I be considered strong enough to know this information? To access that information, the system stated matter-of-factly, you will need to create or purchase the Mark L armor. Only then will you be considered strong enough to gain access to it and deal with the consequences that come with knowing this knowledge. 11. I let out an exasperated sigh as I opened the system shop and began scrolling through the items. My eyes lit up when I finally found the armor the system had mentioned. Excitedly, I clicked on it and an interface opened up before me, displaying the armor's specifications and features, as well as the timeline it belonged to. As I scrolled through the details, I couldn't help but marvel at the armor's superior strength compared to my own. That is, until I saw the price. My mood instantly soured as I realized I couldn't afford it. I closed the window and continued flying in silence, not even wanting to think about the exorbitant price of the armor. Trying to shake off my disappointment, I attempted to console myself. Who cares about the 4th Todink bra anyways? I muttered under my breath. It's just another stupid monster that I'll eventually cross paths with, I'm sure. There's no need for me to spend that much just to access some knowledge, but despite my best efforts, my curiosity got the best of me. I couldn't help but wonder about the 4th Todink bra. My curiosity continued to gnaw at me, despite my attempts to quell it. Finally, unable to resist any longer, I asked the system a question. How about this, system? Give me the information I can unlock with my points currently. Is that an option? My heart raced with anticipation as I waited for the system's response. The system did not disappoint as it replied almost instantly, indeed that is an option. A wave of excitement rushed through me as I realized that I was about to uncover something big. Yes, I exclaimed, my heart racing with anticipation. Points deducting. Completed. Current points. 0, 1. The system deducted my points, and my balance went down to 0. I felt a pang of regret at the loss, but I gritted my teeth and focused on the information the system was about to reveal. 1. The 4th Todink bra was the one that was created upon your birth into the Modern Family show, the system said in a monotone voice. 6. My eyes widened in shock as the system revealed the information I had been so eagerly waiting for. My mind raced as I tried to process the revelation. How could I have missed this? My birth into the Modern Family itself was a huge change, so of course, a Todink bra must have been created. 1. I don't know how I could have missed this. My birth into the Modern Family itself was a huge change, so of course a Todink bra must have been created. But if that is the case, then, how come no one knows of its existence? It should have been created upon my birth and must have caused some type of chaos, just like the immortal Wendigo, yet no one seems to know anything. I'm sure I would have died by that Todink bra that was created because of me, yet I have never even seen it. 3. How is it that no one has seen such a thing? Why is that, system? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on surviving in this unpredictable world, that kept throwing curveballs left, right, and center, that I hadn't even had the time to consider the possibility of a Todink bra being created upon my birth. But now, with this knowledge, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. If it was created because of me upon my birth, then surely it would have caused chaos and destruction just like the Wendigo upon its creation. This is what the frog was referring to, it seems. Yet, it's weird that no one seemed to know of its existence from my family, yet the frog and maybe other do. I couldn't understand, so I just quietly waited for the system to continue and elaborate. I waited in silence for a good minute as I kept flying, but the system did not say anything as a realization set in, followed by a lot of annoyance. "Is that it?" I shouted, and feeling anger bubbling up. "Sir, is what it?" Jarvis spoke as I realized that I had evidently spoken aloud. "Nothing, Jarvis, don't worry about it, okay, sir. If there is anything, do tell me. I would be happy to provide you with any assistance." "Sure, thank you, Jarvis." I was beyond frustrated with the system. I had spent all of my hard-earned points for just that. "This is a scam," I shouted towards the system, feeling completely annoyed at its lack of information. Were they created by freaking AI Sports or something? And system, what do you even mean by deal with the consequences of knowing this information? Unfortunately, you can't access this information yet, son of B. Narrator Pov. Imagine the text being spoke by Morgan Freeman. 3 Sorry for that. James seems to need a moment to get all of his anger out on the system. 1. Chapter 103, Celebrating Relief and Confrontation with the Consequences. James seems to need a moment to get all of his anger out on the system. As James soared through the air, his colorful language punctuating the wind like bursts of fiery confetti, back at Jay's house, a wave of relief washed over the group. They hugged and clapped each other's backs, beaming with joy. The news that Jarvis had shared was like a small beacon of hope in a dark night. James was safe and was heading back to the house uninjured. The room was filled with an infectious energy, the kind that radiates from people who have been relieved of their worries and are filled with joy. For a few moments, they forgot about the dangers of the monsters and the possibility of losing James and the consequences of summoning the military. They laughed and celebrated as if they had just won the lottery. Claire was even crying tears of joy as she felt a huge stone of worry get lifted off her chest. But not everybody in this world was happy at James' survival. Colonel Banks' phone rang, and his expression turned serious. He sat on the chair and answered the call, listening intently to the voice on the other end. It was none other than the President of USA, and he wanted answers. Banks was to report to a meeting with some of the most powerful men in the country, 3 4-star generals that would judge the fate of Banks and Lieutenant Colonel North. They were the highest rank in the military. Banks knew that this was a time for action. The fate of both Colonel Banks and Lieutenant Colonel North hung by a precarious thread, one that could snap at any moment. The generals of the military had been alerted to the situation and were now on the move. Colonel Banks was on a mission given to him by his real superior, and he wasn't about to let anyone or anything stand in his way, and for sure not a mere soldier's mess up stand in his way. He had meticulously prepared to present a video of James to the generals. He had high hopes that the evidence would be enough to sway their decision. Colonel Banks was a shrewd man who knew how to play the game. He had lived through so many years, he was, no doubt, prepared to ruthlessly sacrifice Lieutenant Colonel North's future to secure his mission. Meanwhile, the frog had made its way to a modern white mansion. As it hid in the grass, it peered through a window and saw a group of people celebrating something. The frog had a decent idea as to what they were celebrating, and it let out a cackle. They ranged in age from young children to elderly adults, but they all seemed to be in high spirits. The frog's eerie smile widened as it watched the revelers from its hiding spot. It seemed to be planning something truly treacherous. Whatever its plan, the frog was clearly relishing the thought of causing mischief and mayhem. It was truly a chilling sight. Now, it seems to me that James has calmed down, so it's time I say goodbye, everybody. It's been fun. James Pov, the voice of Jarvis, resounded in my ears, snapping me back to reality. Sir, we are approaching your grandparents' house. They have been notified of your safety just a few moments ago, Jarvis said, his tone professional as always. P2 okay, I nodded to myself as I saw Grandpa Jay's house come inside in the far distance through the armor's enhanced and vision. A sense of comfort washed over me. Though my mind had been preoccupied with a mystery surrounding my birth and the enigma of the Todink bra. Seeing my grandpa's house filled me with a sense of ease after all of these events that happened. The Todink bra continued to occupy my mind, however, an ever-present reminder of the many unanswered questions that swirled within me. My birth, the mysterious system, and even the third Todink Bra itself were all puzzles that remained unsolved, shrouded in a fog of mystery, leaving me feeling more lost than ever. Despite my best efforts, it seemed that accessing the answers to these questions was an impossible task. The house kept getting closer and closer until I landed on the backyard of Grandpa Jay's house. As I landed in my grandpa's backyard, I felt a sense of complete relief. Though I was grateful to have arrived safely, my heart ached at the thought that my family may have been worried about me. "Sir, may I inform them of your arrival, or would you like to inform them yourself?" "I'll meet them myself, Jarvis." "All right, sir." I thanked Jarvis for his offer. I knew that I had to face my family on my own. Walking towards the back door, I steeled myself for what was to come. They had learned a lot of new things about me, such as my fight with a Wendigo, Jarvis's abilities, and they now knew about my armor's abilities, so I was filled with a mix of anticipation and apprehension to see what was to come. My footsteps were slow and measured as I made my way towards the back door. The crunch of sand underfoot was a stark reminder of the storm. My mind wandered back to the frog and the powerful sandstorm it had created. Lost in thought, I was caught off guard when the sand in front of me started swirling. Panic set in as I found this to be a familiar situation. The sand in front of me swirled and mixed, gradually taking on the shape of the frog. I felt my heart racing as I stepped back, activating all of my lasers and reaching for another emblem. The creature had already proven to be incredibly powerful and dangerous, and I wasn't about to take any chances playing around with just lasers alone. The frog stared at me with its beady eyes and twisted grin, its form now fully solidified in front of me. "Since you have rejected my offer, James, why don't I offer you a counter-offer?" it sneered, its voice full of malice and contempt. Chapter 104, The Catch. "I don't want any more offers from you," I snarled, my palms crackling with blue energy, with my fingers getting closer to the activation of the emblem 1. I didn't wait and a blue laser got shot out my armor's palms, shooting towards the frog. The frog's body turned into sand upon impact, making my laser completely useless, leaving a small burnt mark on the grass. It was not noticeable, and could easily be passed off as something hit that place during the storm, so I didn't worry. The frog's body reformed as it chuckled, its beady eyes glinting with malice. "Oh, but this time I'm sure you'd be interested after all. You wouldn't want your family happily celebrating inside to suddenly suffocate from the sand that you brought inside after the storm, would you? And I don't think the trick you used to escape last time would work that easily. Plus, where are you even going to run to, even if your emblem works?" it crackled menacingly. "Are you perhaps gonna leave your family to die just to save yourself?" it said, and crackled, excited at such a prospect that would quiet the entertaining sight to see my frustration and anger boiled over, and I gritted my teeth in fury. It seemed like no matter what I did, this world was determined to crush me. My carefully crafted plans and weapons against being that might come after my family were all completely useless against this sand monster who was insanely fast and could easily avoid physical attacks, and I was left feeling completely trapped. The sand frog's grin stretched wider, its eyes gleaming with anticipation. It was as if it relished the fact that I was at its mercy, a mere pawn in its game. "You see, James," it said, dragging out each syllable for effect. "The offer goes something like this: I will protect you." My mind raced, trying to figure out just what the frog meant by protecting me. I remember it clearly tried to kill, so why did it have such a sudden change of heart? "What's the catch?" I asked, sure that there must be something else. The sand frog seemed to sense my hesitation, its grin growing even wider. "That's the fun thing about this offer, James," it cackled, enjoying my discomfort. "The catch is that you have to create more Todink Bras." Simple, isn't it? I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease at the creature's words. It wanted me to continue creating more Todink Bras in exchange for its protection. This was just riddled with suspicious behaviors. It first wanted me to stop creating new Todink Bra, and it wants me to do the exact opposite, and on top of that, it wants to protect me. This deal is just too good to be true. I knew that agreeing to the frog's terms was risky, but I didn't have much of a choice. I'm sure that it was either this or everyone inside dying, so I closed my eyes for a moment to steady myself before looking directly at the creature. "I accept this deal," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, hoping for the best. The frog's cackles got much louder, echoing throughout the area as its body started dissolving into sand. "I'll be seeing you around, James," it said as its frog's body dissolved into sand and disappeared. I was left standing alone with my thoughts. What had I just gotten myself into? Was this really worth it? P3 variation. As I turned to head back to Grandpa Jay's house, the back door suddenly opened, and Wednesday stepped out. Her expression was as stoic as ever, but I could sense a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "You're back, huh? What was that sound?" she asked. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "It was nothing," I said, hoping she would drop the subject. "So what happened back there? Why did Jarvis lose contact with your suit?" "Oh, it was actually nothing. Turns out it was just some connection problems happened due to me being deep in the mountains." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press me further. "So where's the Wendigo?" she asked instead as she walked closer to me. "It's locked away," I replied, unmasking myself. "It was a simple retrieval job." She nodded and nodded her head, signaling me to follow her. "Come in, I'm sure they would be happy to see you." I smiled and nodded as I started walking towards the back door following Wednesday. "Oh right. Hey, Wednesday, I won't be able to stay for long," I said as we were walking, and she stopped and turned around. "Why?" she asked, her tone not betraying any emotions. "I've got to go and set up another warehouse to properly dismount my armor and place the Wendigo in a safe place," I said last part hesitantly, but I felt I had to make my leave more convincing. During the flight, Jarvis had officially purchased a bunker in the mountains, and had ordered for the parts needed to build the arms and stands and various other material for different items I planned on getting Jarvis to build during my flight back home. All of the parts should arrive in about 5 to 6 hours at a house Jarvis purchased not too far from the mountain. This was mainly due to Jarvis paying a super high premium for all of these items. Delivery. "Okay." Wednesday simply nodded and continued walking towards the house. As we entered the house, I was greeted by the side of my family, all of them smiling happily. It was a welcome change from the tension and danger I had faced in the mountains. "Hey guys," I said, my spirits lifting. "James. You're back," Gloria exclaimed, rushing over to hug me. "James," I heard Lucas. He also rushed towards me, and anticipating the two bodies about to crash into me at full speed, I quickly dodged using all of my skills. I could handle Luke jumping on me at full speed, but Gloria. 3. Narrator Pov. As James caught his family up to speed, Colonel Banks was gearing up to leave in style. Colonel Banks looked every bit the distinguished military officer as he donned his decorated uniform, adorned with multiple medals. With a blacked-out Mercedes and a convoy of black SUVs for his safety, arranged by the president himself, he set off towards his destination. His hand tightly gripping a black leather rectangular bag, Colonel Banks climbed into the back seat of the Mercedes. His face, set in a stoic expression, betrayed no emotions. Accompanied by a military plane, Colonel Banks was en route to the White House. James had his own plans to attend to. After bidding a swift goodbye to his family, James took off into the sky, the car carrying Wednesday back to Nevermore as he flew towards the mountains, headed to the mountain bunker. The bunker, purchased by Jarvis, required installation of equipment to properly dismount my armor, and James had to take care of it. Despite the work ahead, he felt prepared and ready to tackle the task at hand. Chapter 105, Meeting the President. Time flew by quickly, and before they knew it 2 hours had passed, and Colonel Banks was trailing behind a woman through the long, elegant halls of the White House. He had a sense of purpose as he marched forward, his eyes fixed on his destination. They finally arrived in front of a door, which the woman opened, revealing a spacious room with a large round table. Sitting around the table were 4 men, with the president seated in the center and the 3 generals scattered around the table. Colonel Banks sized up the men, noticing their military decorations and the stark difference in attire between them and the president's formal yet simple black suit. The 3 generals were all distinguished men, with a lifetime of experience in the military. They looked serious and somber, their faces etched with lines of experience, as they considered the events of the day. The president was equally grave, despite his formal attire. Colonel Banks took a deep breath as he walked in and took a seat at a chair that was positioned opposite the president, his heart calm, not really intimidated by their presence. He placed his leather bag on the table and waited for what was to come. The tension in the room was palpable as the president spoke. "Good afternoon, Colonel Banks. I'm sure you know why you are here," the president spoke first. Colonel Banks nodded his head in agreement and replied in a calm voice, "Yes sir, I do." The president gestured towards the 3 generals and said, "Perfect, the 3 generals here have been notified about the incident that took place earlier in the day," the president said as he leaned forward towards Colonel Banks slightly. The president's eyes bore into Colonel Banks, conveying a sense of intimidation. Just what the hell happened? The room went silent with nobody speaking. Everyone in the room could sense the tension in the air and all eyes were pointed straight towards Colonel Banks waiting for an explanation. Colonel Banks looked at all of them calmly, not feeling any pressure as he began explaining what had happened. The soldiers were, according to their reports, deployed there by a superior order for a search and rescue. They however identified an unknown being which they assumed to be an alien and asked it to turn itself into the army or be attacked. The alien in question didn't comply and the soldiers shot at the being, missing completely, and the bullets that were shot towards the assumed alien missed and fell back onto the soldiers, causing the casualties. That is the basic summary of what happened. He spoke with a level of detachment that belied the gravity of the situation. Colonel Banks looked around the room, meeting the gaze of everyone at the table, conveying a sense of confidence and resolve. The room was filled with a palpable sense of tension as they considered the implications of his words. The president and the generals were clearly taken aback by what they had just heard. The president spoke up after a few moments of stunned silence. "Colonel Banks, alien, let's be realistic." Colonel Banks replied, "Yes sir, that is what the soldiers thought of the unidentified being is, an alien." One of the generals spoke up, "You're going to have to provide some sort of context or proof, Colonel Banks. Your claim is just too absurd." "That is a very understandable conclusion, however I have video proof of it." "Then please show us," the president said. Colonel Banks calmly nodded and reached for his leather bag. He removed a laptop and opened it, facing it towards the president and the generals, and pressed play on a video that was already there on the screen. Opened. The video played out on the screen, and everyone in the room watched the events with rapt attention. They saw the red flash, heard Lieutenant Colonel North's warning towards the being, and watched as the red being shot up into the air at incredible speeds when the soldiers started firing their guns on the order of Lieutenant Colonel North. After the warning countdown, all that was left behind by the red being was smoke as it disappeared into the clouds. The video ended with a black screen, and Colonel Banks closed the laptop. The room was filled with a stunned silence, and the president and generals had their mouths agape. Colonel Banks spoke, "That is what I am talking about, sir. That is the red being that the soldiers assumed to be an alien." The president and generals were left speechless for a while, trying to process what they had just seen. "Colonel Banks," the president said, not knowing what to say. The room was silent for quite a while before one of the generals broke the silence and spoke up. The room was silent for quite a while before one of the generals broke the silence and spoke up. He addressed Colonel Banks with a pointed question, "Who gave the orders to go there, Colonel Banks?" The generals shifted in their seats, exchanging uneasy glances. One of them cleared their throat and broke the silence. "Colonel Banks," he said, "we need answers. Who authorized this mission? You said superior, aren't you their direct superior?" The general's eyes narrowed as he continued, "I know I didn't order a search and rescue, and above me is only the president who can order the military like this." The general was visibly frustrated and agitated. He oversaw the part of the army containing Colonel Banks. See, the responsibility could definitely fall under the general himself. Colonel Banks looked to have been put in a tough position, as this was a tough news to tell. He didn't know who ordered the soldiers for the search and rescue himself. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling the weight of the silence in the room. He knew he had to speak up but didn't know what to say. He cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I did not order the search and rescue." He looked up at the president, hoping to convey his innocence. The president, who had been sitting quietly, spoke up. "Colonel Banks, if you didn't do it and he didn't do it," he pointed towards the general, "and I most definitely didn't do it," he pointed towards himself and continued, "then who did it?" The president's voice grew louder, and he seemed to not be impressed by what was going on. Chapter 106, The Breach. The president's voice echoed through the room, each word a tangible weight that seemed to press down upon the gathered group. His anger was palpable, his emotions raw and unfiltered as he slammed his fist down on the table and leaned forward. "Either one of you is lying or there has been a serious breach in the army," he growled, his eyes blazing with fury. It was clear that they were in the midst of something significant, something that had the potential to unravel the very fabric of their country's secrets. The generals exchanged worried looks, their expressions etched with concern as the full weight of the president's words sank in. These were men who had spent their entire lives in service to their country, who had seen and weathered countless storms, and yet they were visibly shaken. The enormity of what the president had just said was not lost on them, and they knew that the stakes were higher than any recent wars they had waged. One of the generals, a grizzled veteran with a stern expression, turned towards the president and spoke up. "Sir," he said, his voice laced with concern, "if there has been a breach of such a high level within the military, what about the classified documents of the colonel to major general ranks? Isn't there a very real chance that they could be leaked to the public? It was a valid point, one that the president had no answer for, and he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his nose thoughtfully. The president leaned back in the chair as he rubbed his nose, as he took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as he tried to quell the rising panic within him. "Let's calm down and think logically," he said, his voice low and measured. Turning his head to Colonel Banks, he continued, "Unfortunately, if what you have said is true, then we have much bigger problems than the being in red. We need to focus on plugging this breach before anything else. You're free to go." Colonel Banks nodded solemnly, his eyes betraying a sense of urgency and concern. However, that was merely just an act he had to put on. He went to grab his laptop, but the president stopped him. "Leave that laptop here. You can go, but that stays with us." Colonel Banks simply nodded and made his exit, the empty leather bag slung over his shoulder like a weight. As Colonel Banks was about to close the door behind him, the voice of the president echoed towards him. Colonel Banks stood frozen for a moment as the president's voice echoed in his ears. "Everything discussed in this room is completely confidential." Colonel Banks didn't turn his face to the president and visibly nodded his head in agreement. "Of course, sir. Nothing happened in this discussion," he said, assuring the president of his discretion. As he simply shut the door behind him and started walking away. Meanwhile, James was focused on his flight towards the mountains, where his new underground bunker would be located, when Jarvis informed him about the video of him surrounded by the military being played on a secure and private network belonging to the military. "Who is watching the video, Jarvis?" James asked, wanting to know more. Jarvis replied, "Sir, it's the president and a few four-star generals, along with another unidentified person." James wasn't too bothered by this information, as he knew he wouldn't be tracked by the government, as the government doesn't have such capabilities. James nonchalantly asked, "What are they talking about?" Jarvis responded, "Sir, they are currently talking about the military systems being breached." This information piqued James' curiosity, and he asked Jarvis to connect the microphone on the laptop so that he could eavesdrop on what was being discussed. Jarvis connected the microphone, and James listened intently as the president spoke. "This is a very serious matter," the president said. "If indeed the technological systems have been breached, we must take action immediately and identify the breach's location. Major General Michael, you are in charge of the technological sector, aren't you? Immediately mobilize all of the top available forces to check for the location of the breach and close it. We need to act fast," he said, his voice laced with urgency. "Change the security verification and passwords of everyone. This is our top priority right after the breach fixing, then find the perpetrators responsible for this." The major's voice was calm as he spoke up after the president. "Yes, sir, I'm on it. However, it's clear that the people who created the breach must be top-notch hackers. It's amazing that no one had noticed it until now." He paused, a note of concern in his voice. "We'll have to tread carefully, sir. This could be just the tip of the iceberg." P3 Alright, try to keep this under wraps. However, find the best hackers in the country and offer them a pardon for minor to half pardon for any cyber-related major crimes they have committed and get them to help. You are dismissed, Major. 3 Variation. The president leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowed in thought. "Alright, try to keep this under wraps. We need to find the best hackers in the country and offer them a deal they can't refuse. Pardon them for minor to half a pardon for their major cyber-related crimes they have committed and get them to help us locate and fix this as well as track the people behind it," he said as he looked up at the major. "You're dismissed, Major. And good luck." "Yes, sir." There was a sound of chair shuffling and the door opening and shutting. The president looked up, his face impassive as he spoke to the 2 other generals. "Do we have any suspicions on any country or group that might have organized the attack, sir?" "In my opinion, Russia is the country we have most strained relations with at the moment. But there's also China and North Korea, who could be responsible as the relations with them aren't the best." Chapter 107, Gift of Ruby. The president thoughtfully spoke. "North Korea would not risk starting a war with us. China, on the other hand, will not risk it as we have a lot trades going on with them, and they would pip the trades to fall through." 3 He leaned back in his chair and let out a deep sigh. The room fell silent for a moment as the president weighed the possibilities. His mind raced as he tried to think. "I cannot rule out the possibility of Russian involvement," he finally admitted, his voice low and grave. "Our relationship with them has been strained, to say the least." The tension in the room was palpable, and the president could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. James, who was soaring through the air in his armored suit, let out a sigh as he ordered Jarvis to disconnect from the laptop. He felt that this was enough eavesdropping on the president and stopped. He personally didn't really care as James knew he was safe either way from the government. Sure, sir. But I have a question. Won't this lead to a potential war? If the cause for this was not found, then the president could only assume that it must have been the Russians and have a talk with the Russian president, which I am sure would not go over well, and surely a war could start between USA and Russia, Jarvis said hesitantly. James paused for a moment, pondering the question. No, we won't let it come to that. Instead, you will create a fake breach, very well hidden yet enough to be discovered after some time, and frame a large cybernetic criminal organization for it. That should steer them away from focusing on the Red Bean case for a while. Understood, sir, Jarvis acknowledged. James nodded as he kept flying towards the mountains. Meanwhile, Wednesday had already arrived at Nevermore. The car drove into the school through the creepy metal front gates and stopped right in front of the entrance of the school. Wednesday stepped out of the car in her purplish school uniform. She took a breath of the fresh natural air as she looked towards the gate. As she reached for the door handle to shut the car door, she heard someone calling out her name. Wednesday turned around and saw Enid waving excitedly at her. Thing perched on her shoulders looking extremely crossed with Wednesday. It was a lot of chapters ago and I don't remember whether Wednesday took Thing with her when she was leaving, so we will go with Thing was left here in her dorm. Wednesday was shocked silently. As she saw Thing perched on Enid's shoulders, her mind raced as she tried to understand why Thing was so close to Enid. She knew that Thing would never be comfortable around anyone other than the Addams family, especially someone as cheerful and colorful as Enid. She was puzzled by the fact that Thing was not only close to Enid but also perfectly comfortable. Suddenly, Wednesday's thoughts were interrupted by Enid's voice. Hey, Wednesday. I've missed you so much. How was your trip? Wednesday was taken aback by Enid's extra cheerful demeanor, knowing that Enid's bubbly. However, she quickly composed herself. Hi, Enid, Wednesday replied coldly. My trip was fine, thank you for asking. What are you doing here? Enid's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. Oh, I just came to pick up some books from my classes. I was just passing by here when I saw you exit the car, Enid said as she peeked behind Wednesday to look at the car. Wednesday looked at Enid with a mix of confusion and irritation. Why was Enid so focused on her car? It was a sleek and modern vehicle, a departure from the more gothic style she was used to, but that was none of Enid's business. Thanks for noticing, Enid, she said, her tone dry. But I don't have time to chat. Thing, let's go. Wednesday looked over at Thing and said. However, Thing seemed to have other ideas. It stayed put on Enid's shoulders, refusing to move. Wednesday's frustration grew as she tried to coax it down. Thing, let's go, she said, her voice rising with impatience. When it still didn't budge, Wednesday's annoyance turned to anger. Thing, get down here now, she said, her tone cold and commanding. Enid had a smug expression as she watched Thing ignore Wednesday, which only made Wednesday's mood sour. Wednesday was quiet for a few seconds before she simply started walking away, causing Thing to surprisingly turn its head to look at her going away. I brought some precious jewels from my trip, Thing. I thought I'd give them to you as a gift, but I guess I'll just have to throw them away now, Wednesday said as she stopped and turned her head to face Thing, who seemed to have been struggling with something. There's even a ruby. Thing's body rose all of a sudden and Wednesday knew she had Thing right where she wanted it. She dangled the promise of a gift, a ruby no less, in front of it. She knew how much Thing loved rubies, and just like expected, Thing hopped off Enid's shoulders and crawled over to her feet, looking up at her with a contrite expression. Wednesday couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as she picked Thing up and placed it back on her shoulders. As she walked away, Wednesday allowed herself a small smile. She had won this round, and it felt good. She felt a sense of power and control over the situation, something she had not been feeling since the trip and its events. Enid was left behind, still trying to process what had just happened and how she just lost so miserably. Thing, on the other hand, was just excitedly sitting on Wednesday's shoulders, looking forward to getting its favorite type of gem, the ruby. Chapter 108, The Arrival of the Tools and Machinery. As I approached the mountain range where my future base was located, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation wash over me. It had taken me 4 long hours to get here, but now that I was finally here, it felt like everything was about to fall into place. The sky was a beautiful shade of blue, and the sun was just starting to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the entire mountain range. As I drew closer, I could see the peaks of the mountains reaching up towards the sky, some of them so high that they seemed to disappear into the clouds themselves. I was completely in awe of the mountains as I flew closer to them. From up here, they looked even more impressive, rising up majestically from the ground like ancient, sleeping giants. The colors of the mountains were beautiful too, a mix of different shades of gray, brown and black. There was something almost mystical and mysterious about them, and I found myself wondering what secrets they might hold. But as I drew closer to the base of the mountains, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The dark aura that surrounded the mountains was palpable, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The forests at the bottom of the mountains were shrouded in darkness, and I couldn't help but feel like there was something lurking in the shadows. Despite my misgivings, I pushed on, eager to explore this mysterious, eerie place. I began to fly towards the place where Jarvis had delivered all of the necessary items for our base, my excitement growing with every passing second. As I flew closer, soon I could see a large, two-story wooden cabin perched on the edge of a steep mountain slope. There was a massive gray truck parked in front of it, and I couldn't help but wonder what it was doing there. Was it there to deliver some of the items we needed? I decided to hang back and observe for a while, waiting to see if anyone emerged from the cabin or Jarvis. Why is there a truck in front of the cabin? I asked, confused. I thought that maybe the items were being delivered by that truck, so I stayed up in the air out of sight. Sir, that is a truck I had also ordered for, to be delivered here. I figured that the transportation of the heavy machinery and tools we needed to the base would be much easier with this truck here, so I included it under one of the necessities for the base. I nodded in agreement, impressed by his foresight. It was clear that he had thought of everything, leaving nothing to chance. As I flew closer, I couldn't help but admire the truck. It was huge, with a rugged, industrial look to it that made it seem almost invincible. I could see how it would be incredibly useful in transporting the tools. Jarvis, just out of curiosity, but how did everything cost, sir? Approximately $30 million. Okay, well, just what made it cost that much, sir? Most items were not available in the regular market, so I had to go to the black market to find them, and their delivery and the parts that were available all had at least a week of delivery time minimum, so I paid extra for the fastest possible delivery with highest quality materials and tools. When Jarvis told me how much everything had cost, approximately $30 million, I was taken aback. That was an enormous sum of money, but when he explained the reasons behind the cost, the difficulty of finding certain items and the need for quick, high-quality delivery, I understood. It was a small price to pay for the safety and security of our future base and the time such money had saved, because money was not really a matter of importance to me anymore too. As I landed in front of the truck, I was struck by how many boxes there were. They were piled high, hundreds of boxes, each filled with all sorts of sophisticated machinery and tools. I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me as I realized that we now had everything we needed to build our base, and more. The possibilities seemed endless, and the excitement was almost too much to bear. I couldn't wait to unpack them and start putting everything together. Now the real challenge was how to power all of this equipment. I knew I needed something powerful, something reliable. Luckily, before leaving, I had grabbed the old arc reactor from the car. One I thought as I unwrapped it from the cloth. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. With this in hand, I was confident that I could make anything requiring energy work. After placing the arc reactor down, I asked Jarvis where the keys to the truck and cabin were. Jarvis calmly informed me that the keys to the truck were under one of the front tires, and the keys to the cabin were located on a welcome mat. Simple enough, I thought with a chuckle before I went to collect the keys. Jarvis went through multiple verification of legitimacy of the sellers and shows of wealth and power. It was clear that he had taken every precaution to ensure that no one could scam us or steal from us. Jarvis, how did you make sure that we got everything and were not scammed or something was stolen on the way here? I asked, already having an idea in mind that Jarvis might have used. Sir, it was not too hard. All I did was find out their real information, name, age, home address and siblings and parents' location. It was all a really simple matter. Yay. I thought that's what Jarvis will do. After all, this must give in complete fear to the sellers on the black market, and they must have made sure nothing was missing from the order. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109, Road to the Bunker, a treacherous journey in a powerful truck. As I walked over to the boxes, I saw that there were 3 hardboards filled with countless papers attached to them, detailing every item that Jarvis had ordered. I grabbed the board and started looking for a few specific items I had especially ordered for the defense of the base against being specifically like the frog monster. I flipped through a few pages, and with a sigh I realized that they were all there, even though I knew Jarvis would not let anything go missing. I raised my head from the hardboard and looked at the boxes. I knew that I had to focus if I was going to get everything loaded into the truck in time before it gets dark, as that would be nearly impossible to navigate through the mountain safely. Slowly but surely, I got to work. Some of the boxes were heavier than others, but I hardly felt a weight thanks to the armor that I was wearing. It was a tedious task, but I knew that it was essential if we were going to make it to the underground bunker in time. An hour passed, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, the last box was loaded, and I breathed a sigh of relief. It was time to hit the road. The sun had still not completely set, and there was still some light, so I hurriedly shut the big back doors of the truck and entered the truck through the front door. Inside the truck's seating area was comfortable with enough space to move around, which was surprising as this truck seemed to be on the luxurious end. I put the key into the ignition and started up the truck. The interior was quite modern. It had all sorts of advanced tools, including an advanced GPS, cameras that showed all of the blind spots, and more, which caught me by surprise. I couldn't help but wonder what type of truck this was, as there was no label on it, and decided to ask that question to Jarvis later. "Jarvis, show me the map to the underground bunker," Jarvis responded promptly, projecting a detailed map on the screen in front of me. Jarvis had marked out the best possible route through the treacherous mountain terrain that lay ahead for me, so I didn't need to do that myself. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as I began the journey towards the bunker. The engine roared to life as I put the truck in gear and hit the gas. According to Jarvis, it would take us half an hour to reach the bunker. I knew that the drive would be difficult, even with the best path, as this mountainous range doesn't really have a proper road leading towards the bunker. Rather, the road is rather raggedy, but I was determined to reach my destination before complete darkness took over, making it nearly impossible to safely reach the bunker. I couldn't even have rested the night, as that would have been extremely uncomfortable on my body, considering the fact that I would have had to rest with the armor still on me. As I made my way through the rocky terrain, Jarvis informed me that my car had already dropped Wednesday a few hours ago and was on its way here and would soon arrive in half an hour. Jarvis also told me that the police had tried to pull the car over a staggering 25 times but failed every time they tried to chase after the car. I chuckled to myself, imagining the officers' bewildered expressions as a driverless car burned past them without even slowing down. I felt the wind in my hair as I drove through the winding mountain trails in the big truck. I couldn't help but laugh to myself as I pictured my Audi burning past all of those police officers while they tried to keep up in their cruisers. As I continued along the path, I wondered who had designed this truck, as its suspension was exceptional, easily gliding over the potholes that riddled the rough terrain. The truck proved to be a tough beast, able to take on the rugged terrain with ease, impressing me with its exceptional suspension. I couldn't help but marvel at the engineering that went into creating this vehicle. My curiosity piqued. I wondered who had designed it and what other features it possessed. Despite the challenging driving conditions, I felt safe and secure within the truck, thanks to the cameras that provided an excellent view of my surroundings. As I drove on, the path became even more treacherous. The large truck was not built for such rough terrain, and I had to navigate the potholes and rocky roads with care. However, the cameras that were installed in the truck were a godsend, providing me with a clear view of my surroundings and helping me avoid potential obstacles. Though the journey was tough, I felt confident and in control, thanks to the excellent features of the truck too. After half an hour of challenging driving, I finally reached a relatively smooth dirt road. It was a welcome respite from the bumpy mountain trails. As I drove along the road, I heard Jarvis chime in, informing me that I was getting close. The sun had just set, casting a golden glow on the horizon, and the night sky was taking over. I felt a sense of excitement building up inside me as I realized that I was almost there. Suddenly, I spotted a massive entrance on the mountain in front of me. It was a rectangular structure made of gray bricks and jutted out of the rocky surface. A black metal gate was the only thing standing between me and what lay beyond. I couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay hidden within the mountain, behind that imposing entrance. "Jarvis, can you open it up?" "No sir, I cannot. I first need to take control of the bunker, which can only be done if you connect me to a little port opening at the front of the bunker," Jarvis responded. "Okay, then how do I connect you to the bunker, too?" Chapter 110, The Fortress's Impenetrable Entrance. Sir, in the smallest package there is a USB. Please connect that USB to the armor data entry port. I will install a part of myself into the USB. Then you can use the USB and plug into the port of the bunker. Jarvis explained how I could gain control of the bunker's mechanisms. I eagerly waited for him to finish. The program will then connect to the bunker's mechanisms, allowing me to control them remotely. Since the program is a part of me and connected to energy, I can easily track and connect with it to fully control the bunker's mechanisms. Alrigs, I said as I closed the truck and jumped out of the front door. I rushed over to the back doors and opened them. I knew where I had kept the small package and each one of them had a separate label which told exactly what was inside them. I immediately located it in the back of the truck. The search was a breeze thanks to the detailed labeling. Jarvis opened the data entry port. Yes sir, I waited quietly for the slot to open, and when it did, I carefully inserted the USB, relieved that it fit on the first try. A small sense of satisfaction washed over me as I successfully inserted the USB in the very first attempt. I waited with bated breath, my eyes glued to the loading bar that appeared in front of me. When Jarvis confirmed the installation, a feeling of excitement and anticipation flooded through me. I quickly found it and inserted the USB, and a bar appeared in front of my eyes inside the armor. I pulled out the USB and with a confident stride, I made my way to the base where Jarvis had directed me. I walked over to the base where Jarvis pointed out that there would be a piece of fake cement on the side of the wall, which was where the port was hidden. I quickly found the fake cement and removed it, revealing a small USB port in the wall. I quickly inserted the USB into it, failing the first 2 times for some annoying reason. Even if it was inserted in the right way, a loading bar appeared in front of me, and I watched the bar fill up, indicating that Jarvis was connecting to the bunker. The seconds felt like hours as I waited for it to finish. When it finally did, I couldn't contain my excitement. I unplugged the USB, closed the port, and jumped back into the truck, ready to see what lay ahead. Jarvis, open it up, I said excitedly, watching with anticipation, and on cue the black metal door started rolling over to one side, bringing in some visibility as to how thick the gates actually were, which utterly shocked me. Even if it was just a part of it in the dark, the metal structure slowly slid to the side. I gasped at the sheer thickness of the gates when I saw it properly. I couldn't help but wonder why someone would create such an impenetrable entrance. Feeling a sudden rush of curiosity wash over me, I wondered just how could anyone abandon such a fortress. The gate slowly rolled open and it revealed the thick metal slab of a door that looked to be about 40 feet in thickness. 6 As I peered through the opening, I noticed another gate further ahead, making me wonder what kind of secrets lay behind this mysterious entrance. The first gate rolled open with a loud thump that echoed through the area, making me jump in my seat, startled slightly. I couldn't help but marvel at the engineering prowess that went into creating such a formidable entrance. As the gate came to a stop, I noticed a second gate a bit further in the distance, and I watched in anticipation and curiosity as the second gate further ahead started to roll open. Slowly it opened itself to me, and it was the same color and thickness as the first, which only added to my amazement of such strong gates. Jarvis wasn't lying when he said it could resist most extremely powerful nuclear bombs in the world. An average nuclear bomb shelter gate's thickness would usually be around 20 feet, but this gate is double that on a single gate, and there is 2 gates. My curiosity was piqued as the second gate rolled open, and I couldn't help but wonder what lay beyond. I wondered as to whether there would be a third gate. To my not so much of a surprise, there was no third gate, but rather a wide and tall tunnel that stretched out before me. The tunnel seemed to go on far into the distance, covered in darkness, and I felt a sense of both apprehension and excitement as I shifted the gears and slowly accelerated the truck and started driving inside. As the truck's wheels crossed over the threshold of the first gate, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The darkness inside the tunnel made it hard to see anything other than what was illuminated by the headlights. The fact that it was nighttime did not help in the slightest. It wasn't until the truck was somewhat inside the tunnel that I realized the walls were made entirely of metal, in a rectangular box shape that covered all 4 sides. Suddenly, I felt a slight jolt as the truck's wheels drove over something. My heart skipped a beat as I wondered what could have caused it. But before I could get out of the truck to investigate, the lights on all 4 sides of the metal tunnel flickered on, illuminating the entire tunnel. The brightness was almost blinding after being in the darkness for so long, and I had to squint my eyes to adjust to the sudden change. Soon, my eyes recovered and I got out of the truck and looked around. The floor I was standing on was white in color, and the lights were all white lights shining brightly throughout the tunnel. Now I had much better clarity of what was ahead. 7. Chapter 111, A Long Way Down. I realized that the tunnel was much longer than I had initially thought and that there seemed to be a slope leading downwards, which I couldn't even begin to see the end of after the second gate, and my heart sank as I realized how far, or rather how deep, it actually was. The tunnel was colored in a metallic gray shade that reflected the bright white light, making it look like an advanced and futuristic tunnel. I stopped the truck to investigate the strange sound that I assumed to have switched on the LUTs. As I jumped out and looked behind the back tires, I saw a small bump on the floor that had caused the lights to turn on when the truck's back wheels drove over it. The front wheels didn't seem to have activated it. I quickly got back in the truck and drove away from the bump. After passing through the second door smoothly, I continued driving down the seemingly endless slope. As I pushed the accelerator, the truck started to pick up speed, and my heart raced with excitement. However, the angle of the truck changed, and I felt the steering start to slip out of my control. I quickly slowed down to a safe speed, trying not to panic as I drove down the never-ending slope. I drove down the slope for what felt like an eternity, with nothing but a metallic walls to keep me company. Suddenly, in the distance, I saw the slope start to level out. My heart leapt with excitement as I saw a short length of straight road appear before me and a door at the end of it. As the truck finally exited the slope, I carefully drove towards the gate. The gate loomed before me, large and imposing. As I approached, I saw that it was shut tight, and I blamed my face in annoyance. I was about to ask Jarvis to open the gate, but before I could speak, the gate suddenly slid open, revealing a massive open space inside. My heart raced with excitement as I took in the vast expanse of the bunker. The materials were similar to the entrance tunnels, as the walls and floors were covered in metal. However, as I looked around seeing all of the open space, I couldn't help but wonder why anyone would need such a strong and big bunker with nothing inside it. As I drove the truck into the bunker through the gate, my curiosity was piqued by the side of another slope leading downwards, this one bot going to deep inside. I couldn't help but wonder what was down there. "Jarvis, what's down there?" I asked curiously. I didn't know too much about Jarvis responded promptly. "That's the second floor, sir. It's a spacious living quarters." As he spoke, my mind raced with thoughts of what the living quarters could hold. The first floor had quite literally nothing other than poor sockets all around. "Just how many floors exactly are there?" I asked curiously, eager to know what I was working with. "In total, this bunker has 3 floors, Jarvis informed me. "You're currently on the first floor. The second floor is accessible through a ramp and is slightly smaller than the first. It houses the living quarters. The third floor is the smallest and can only be accessed through a lift in the second floor. It contains the main frame of the air filtration system, power supply, and more." I was impressed by the size and complexity of the bunker. "I see, so can I bring this truck down to the second floor?" "Unfortunately, sir, this truck won't fit in the second floor," Jarvis said, dashing my hopes of going down there in the truck and not walking. "You'll need to use smaller vehicles, such as the Audi." I nodded in understanding, making a mental note to use the Audi later. After parking the truck, I hopped out and quickly headed to the back doors. I knew that creating Jarvis's arms was a top priority. I needed its help to create the defenses I had in mind for the base, and I couldn't afford to waste any time doing all of them myself. That was just too time-taking. As I opened the back doors, I wondered if the frog had somehow snuck into the bunker. I couldn't let it find out how I made my armor's base, so I had to first create the defense against the frog before I work on creating a disassembling port from my armor. I grabbed the boxes I had packed in the truck and began carefully opening them up. I had packed the boxes in the order that I would need them, so it was easy to start assembling the pieces for Jarvis's hands. The new design was similar to the initial one I had put in the warehouse, but it was improved. I added springs and pistons to increase its reach and better culling to increase its strength. The arm wasn't perfect by any means, rather it was a crude process. I did not have the exact sizes of all the materials, so I had to use the armor's strength to bend them or break them into my desired shape or size. It was exactly what I needed to create the tools and defenses that are gonna be in this bunker, at least in the initial stages. Soon I got to work after opening up the boxes and laying out the part in front of me. It took me a good 3 hours to complete the arm. I was satisfied with the end results. However, the arm itself did not have the best design at a visual standard, rather it was made to be practical, so I did not mind. It had some mass, but I needed to make it into a sleek design to increase its range. Unfortunately, this increase in range and agility meant I now had to sacrifice its strength, which although is now close half of what it could have been, I was fine with it because in the end it was a well-balanced piece of machine. I planned to connect it to a power supply socket further down the wall using extensions, and then attach it to the ground so that it had balance and stability. To move around and lift heavier weight using its attachment to ground. Chapter 112, Frequency Pulsar. Ready, Jarvis, I said, and Jarvis's voice rang out from my phone, confirming that it was ready. With a smile, I plugged the extended socket and I flicked the switch on. A burst of electricity shot through the arms, bringing them to life. I couldn't help but grin as I watched the arms come to life. The fingers moved, and the arms began to calibrate itself. Calibrating, sir, Jarvis's voice rang out, and I waited with bated breath as the arms stretched and moved around, testing their range. It was an impressive sight, and I felt a sense of pride seeing the new improvements I had done to the arm. Sir, what's the strength of the arm? Jarvis asked, and I replied without hesitation, 50 kg or 110 pounds. One impressive, sir, Jarvis commented. The arm is well balanced, with both strength and extra range. It's truly remarkable and much more superior compared to the arms in the warehouse one. As I watched Jarvis moving the arms, I couldn't help but think about the lifting power of the Mark 6. 50 kilograms seemed light in comparison, but I quickly shook off the thought and turned my attention to unloading more boxes. I had a lot of work to do, and I didn't want to waste any time. With the arms completed, it was time to install the cameras and connect them to the power supply. Jarvis needed a proper view of the area I was working in, so it could control the arms properly. Currently Jarvis is using the truck's 360 degrees coverage to monitor everything going on, which would not be convenient as the machines that I plan on building will require detailed observation. The process of installation was simple enough, and within minutes, the cameras were attached to the walls, and everything was connected to the extended socket. It was a simple process of carefully attaching the cameras to the walls surrounding my workspace at the right angle, taking my time to ensure everything was secure. Once the cameras were in place, connecting them was a breeze. I knew I would be creating a lot of machinery in this space, so having the best view for Jarvis was crucial. Jarvis, one arm won't be enough, I said, help me create more. Jarvis promptly replied with pleasure, sir, with a nod. Together, we quickly got to work. I unpacked the parts and me and Jarvis's one arm quickly got to building the second arm with care. Surprisingly, it only took us half the time it had taken me before with just one arm. As I watched Jarvis skillfully finish the last bit of internal wiring the second arm, a thought occurred to me. With multiple arms working simultaneously, how fast could we create machinery? The possibility of an assembly line in the factory was tantalizingly exciting. I couldn't wait to try it out. Previously I didn't need such a thing as I could work perfectly fine with just 2 or 3 arms, but now the needs are larger and I will have to order more materials as currently, I can only create about 5 arms in total. Excitement fueled me as I plugged in the second arm to the extended socket, and it activated without any issues. Without wasting any time, I started unloading the boxes and Jarvis with its 2 arms assisted on the next arm. 3 hours later, I had successfully built 3 more arms, all of which were functioning perfectly. A sense of satisfaction filled me as I looked at all the 5 arms moving around me. They were all just much better than the first version of the arms. However, my work was not yet complete. I had a specific machine in mind that needed building to keep the frog out. It was imperative that the underground bunker was frog-proof, as the frog had already proven itself to be an expert spy, with the ability to turn into sand or dust and sneak anywhere without being found out if someone really perceptive wasn't specifically looking for it. To prevent the frogs from discovering the machines I was creating, I had to create the perfect defense. The frequency pulsar machine I had in mind was similar to the EMBIM, but larger, with 100 mini speakers emitting sounds of different frequencies and strengths. The sound waves could be programmed to create specific patterns that pushed away dust and sand particles. The programming of the sound waves itself was rather a complicated pattern. Usually that's not the case as people can create music easily. Rather, the hard part was successfully using the different frequencies in patterns to push away all kinds sand or dust particles with various different amount of force behind it successfully. These machines had to be placed strategically all over the exterior, near the air vents, doors, and passageways, to ensure that the frog couldn't sneak in using its sand or if it had one, dust form. I quickly got to work, carefully unloading the boxes and focusing on the intricate engineering required. At first, Jarvis simply watched me, taking in the technique so that he could copy it and create enough machines to be placed in every entrance of the base. The noise created by the speakers could be an issue for human ears, so I had to create sound-absorbing materials to line the area of the walls these were placed in to prevent any disturbance or sound to fully go outwards and spread through the mountains. I also designed directional sound technology that would focus the sound waves in a specific direction, pushing away sand and dust without affecting the people inside the bunker. Furthermore, I created a control system for the sound machines that would allow me or mainly Jarvis to adjust the frequency and strength of the sound waves depending on the situation. The machine I was currently working, however, first needed to be tested to ensure that they effectively pushed away the sand and dust without causing any harm to the people inside the bunker. It was a challenging task, but I was determined to create the perfect defense against the frog's spying abilities. In conclusion, creating more arms with Jarvis was a game changer for my work speed. With 5 arms, I was able to work on multiple projects at once. Jarvis' hands were handling the building of the structure of the frequency pulsar, including parts of the intricate engineering required for the frog-proof sound machine. While I mainly focused on creating the frequency patterns, I did not have my holographic table where I could create a design and Jarvis could perfectly create it, so I had to be instructing Jarvis as I was working on the frequency patterns on the laptop, which I realized I need to upgrade along with the upgrade for Jarvis. I was confident that the defense system would keep the frog out and protect my creations from discovery. Chapter 113, A Magical Phenomenon. As I put the final touches on the frequency pulsar machine, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It had taken longer than I anticipated, but the machine was finally complete. The sound absorption material was also finished, ensuring that the machine would not harm anybody inside or outside the bunker with its noise. I couldn't wait to see what it could do, but there was still more work to be done. Teaching Jarvis how to create the frequency pulsar machine took longer than expected, but it was necessary to ensure that it could create more on his own. I had to juggle working on the frequency patterns while coaching Jarvis, which slowed the process down. But in the end, it was worth it as Jarvis could efficiently create the machines with all 5 arms effectively. Now, even though Jarvis was fully capable of creating the machines on his own, I wanted to make sure that the first machine was tested before we produced more. So I gave Jarvis orders to hold off on creating more until we knew that the machine worked as intended. It was a precaution, but one that I felt was necessary. But before all of that, the frequency patterns was crucial to the success of the frequency pulsar machine, so I focused on finishing it before testing the machine. It took a bit longer than expected, but I wanted to make sure that everything was perfect before moving forward. Soon, with the frequency patterns complete, I was eager to test the frequency pulsar machine. I spent an extra half-hour creating two different packs of patterns for each sand and dust. Finally, it was time to put the machine to the test. Holding the frequency pulsar machine in my hands, I felt a sense of anticipation. It was smaller than I expected, but its power was yet to be seen. It was about half the length of an arm and a good 30 centimeters wide, and I made my way to the corner of the bunker. As I approached the corner, I noticed the thick layer of dust that had accumulated there. Without wasting any time, I positioned the machine to face the corner and activated my helmet. I did not bother with the sound-absorbing material since I was not testing it at the moment. I plugged the wire into the socket and the machine hummed to life. The rectangular box with 2 lights lit up, indicating the status of the machine. The green light was on, indicating that it was active and ready to be used. The rectangular box had 2 lights, one green and one red. The green light was currently on, indicating that the machine was active and ready for use. I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement at the prospect of testing out the machine's capabilities. With a nod, and I instructed Jarvis to activate the machine. "Jarvis, activate it to push away the still, fine dust in the corner that it's facing," I said, positioning myself adjacent to the machine to get a better view of the speakers on the front. Slowly increase the range on my command, I added, eager to see what the machine could do. "Activating, sir," Jarvis replied. It's laced with some underlying excitement which surprised slightly, but I moved past it. As Jarvis activated the machine, my eyes were fixed on the speakers. Nothing much seemed to have happened for a few seconds, which caused me to wonder whether it was working or not, but suddenly, I noticed a slight distortion in the air beginning to form in front of the speaker. I watched in amazement as the distortion pulsed, creating a mesmerizing pattern that seemed to be constantly changing. Intrigued by the phenomenon, I focused my attention on the distortion, watching as it continued to pulse in front of the speakers. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that the pattern of the distortion was being pushed forward. It was truly a sight to behold. The distortion itself had seemingly started forming different patterns in the air that was constantly changing, creating new patterns that seemed familiar. As I continued to gaze at the distortion for a while in the air, I couldn't help but be entranced by the way it seemed to form intricate patterns that constantly shifted and changed. It was like watching an ethereal dance in the air, a mesmerizing display that held my attention completely. Despite the fact that I couldn't actually hear the sound being emitted by the frequency pulsar machine, I could feel its vibrations slightly reverberating through my body. It was like being in the middle of a silent earthquake, with the world around me rippling and warping in response to the pulsing, which was an incredible feeling to experience. As I watched the distortion pulse and shift, I couldn't help but notice the way it was affecting the dust particles in front of it. Within a 4-centimeter radius of the distortion that was mainly aimed towards the corner, the dust was being pushed back with incredible force, clearing the area in a matter of seconds. It was like watching a miniature tornado form and dissipate right before my eyes. One excitement thrummed through me as I watched the distortion grow and shift with each passing moment. I knew I had to see what would happen if we increased the range of the frequency pulsar machine, so I asked Jarvis and spoke the words with barely contained eagerness. "Jarvis, increase the range. Let's see what this baby can really do." I had known that the frequency pulsar machine would be impressive, but I hadn't expected it to create such a mesmerizing and otherworldly distortion in the air. It was like witnessing magic in action, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder and awe as I watched the distortion pulse and shift in front of me. I marveled at the way sound waves could create such complex and beautiful patterns in the air. While I knew that large speakers could produce distortions in front of them when loud music was played, the frequency pulsar machine was something else entirely. I also realized why I found them familiar. By emitting sound waves in the specific pattern I had designed them in, it was able to create an intricate and constantly shifting distortion in the air that was unlike anything I had ever seen before, just like the frequency patterns I had created. The more I thought about it, the more amazed I became at the power of sound waves. By causing the air to vibrate using the frequency patterns I made mixed together along with 100 different mini speakers, they could create all sorts of patterns and distortions that were both beautiful and awe-inspiring. As I watched the pulsing of the distortion in front of me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride at having created something so incredible all on accident. Chapter 114, Scorching Fatigue. Increasing the range, Sir Jarvis responded, and I snapped myself out my thoughts and watched closely as the distortion seemed to grow larger and go further away from the frequency pulsar. I leaned forward, transfixed as the distortions grew larger and the pulse traveling through the constantly changing distortions became more visible as the dust in front of the frequency pulsar machine flew back to much further range. It was a hypnotic and mesmerizing sight. The entire area that came under the range of the frequency pulsar machine was clean, not a speck of dust in sight. It was a promising sign of its abilities and left me feeling hopeful and satisfied at creating it in my first attempt. The phenomenon created by the distortions itself was amazing to see, as the distortions that were now more visible were constantly changing, and mesmerizing to witness it. Their sheer complexity was amazing, and I couldn't help but stare in wonder as I got lost in it and entered a state of daze where I focused solely on it and simply admired the phenomenon that I had accidentally created. Suddenly, however, a loud beep sound pierced through the calm, shattering the mesmerizing phenomenon, causing the distortions to completely disappear. It jolted me out of my reverie, and I immediately looked towards the machine, wondering what had gone wrong. It had proven itself and its abilities to push away the dust with absolute ease. Although it had not been tested, the question remained whether this would be effective when facing sands or dust that has a force acting behind it. That would be a real test to see if the frequency pulsar can successfully push back the frog monster in its advances. But that was a test for later on. Right now I was wondering what went wrong. I needed to figure out just what caused the loud beeping and the disappearance of the distortions. The loud beeps came from the frequency pulsar machine, so I carefully moved closer to it to look at what happened. The loud beeps seemed to have shut down along with the distortions that was pushing back the sand. I noticed that there was no light was on, which I found to be strange, as the plug-in switch was switched on. Hoping to get a clearer look of what was going on, I removed my mask and observed it closer. In a matter of seconds, I had an understanding of what had gone wrong. Smoke was slightly sizzling out from the ventilation panels, which could only mean that something had caught on fire inside the machine, or severely overheated. The white smoke coming from the ventilation panels was a troubling sight, mainly because to avoid such a thing happening I had specifically built a temperature monitoring machine to avoid overheating it. The sight of the smoke made uneasy as I equipped my mask and carefully opened the lid to reveal the machine's inner workings. Personally, I had hoped it would work flawlessly the first time, just like the set of special bombs I had created, but it seemed my hopes were too high and I was just being optimistic. My eyes narrowed in frustration as I took in all of the damage in front of my eyes. The cooling system I had created for the entire machine was too weak, the heat generated by the machine was too strong, and had melted the metal the cooling system was used to build, copper. The copper had seemingly melted and fallen into the frequency pulsar's main processor, causing it to burn and get irreparably damaged. Wondering what the heat detector was doing through all this, I noticed that the heat detector stopped working because the high heat had destroyed it in the beginning as it was closer to the processor, and also I noticed by seeing the dripping puddle of metal from the melting heat detector. With a sigh and disappointment filling my chest, I shut the lid knowing that I would have to scrap the entire machine since it was now officially useless. P3 I sat down on the floor, tiredness overtaking me, considering what to do next. The copper I used is an excellent heat conductor, not the best in the world, but definitely up there 3 yet. It couldn't resist the heat being generated by the frequency pulsar and failed and melted due to not having high enough heat resistance. Out of nowhere my stomach let out a large roar of a growl, instantly reminding me that I had forgotten to eat. With a plum to my face I realized how hungry I was. I hadn't fed my body for hours. I had been constantly working, not realizing that I was even hungry. "Jarvis," I called out. "Use the cart to get me food," I ordered. The car had arrived hours ago, and it was stationed at my shack house. "Sir, what would you like?" Jarvis asked. I slumped to the floor to consider what I would like to eat, however my body seemed to have other plans as my stomach let out another nasty growl again, sounding almost like a wild animal roaring to be fed. "Anything will do, just do it fast," I shouted, not wanting to put any effort into thinking as I was beginning to feel really drained of energy and did not feel like making any well-thought-out decisions. I lay down on the floor. I felt exhaustion flood every inch of my body. I realized that I should not have gotten this lost in working on the frequency pulsar and Jarvis's arms, much so that I even forgot about my body. My body had been screaming for food, rest, and care, but I had ignored it subconsciously as I was too focused, and the consequences and the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I decided to rest my body and get some sleep, but before I did that I decided to ask Jarvis to purchase a batch of material that I could use to build a good cooling system for the frequency pulsar. Satisfied at the last request, a heavy sigh escaped my lips as I shut my eyes and let the exhaustion take control of me, slowly dragging me to the depth of a deep sleep. Chapter 115, Ravenous Hunger. Beep. 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 A monotonous beeping sound of an alarm clock played inside his armor for what felt like an eternity by none other than Jarvis, in an attempt to awaken James from his deep sleep. James' eyes shot open as he jolted up from his slumber, wincing as he felt the sharp pain in his shoulders and back. He adjusted himself to get rid of some of the pain, but that didn't result in much decrease in it. He rubbed his eyes and looked around as he observed his surroundings, taking in the side of his car parked a little further away with cardboard boxes and the ruined frequency pulsar and 6 arms that were not moving at all, as he began to remember everything that happened before he had drifted off to sleep. "Right," he said as he put his palms on his face in annoyance. "I fell asleep," he said before slowly standing up and looking at his body. James let out a groan as he rubbed his tired eyes, remembering that he had fallen asleep in his armor. "Well, that explains the pain in my body," he said as he realized that sleeping in the armor ever again was not the best idea. Note to self, never sleep in this damn armor again, he grumbled as he stumbled towards his car, still feeling half asleep. As James approached the Audi, Jarvis's voice responded out, "Good morning, sir. Currently it's 10 a.m. You have been asleep for approximately 12 hours, Jarvis informed him dutifully. "Your parents have called you approximately 10 times before I was forced to inform them about how busy you were getting a much-needed rest, and Miss Wednesday called approximately 7 times before she stopped and asked for an explanation, to who I informed about how busy you were and they both requested a call back. Principal Weems on the other hand has also called you once." James nodded his head as he's still in a half-asleep state as he stumbled towards the car. He remembered that he had asked Jarvis to get him food using the Audi before he fell asleep, so he predicted that the food will still be in the car. Cold, sure, but he didn't care about that. He could feel his empty stomach and dry throat as he tried swallowing his saliva, and knew that first he had to get water and food into his system before he deals with anything such as the calls. When he opened the car's front doors, James was hit with the warm and inviting aroma of fried chicken, Following the scent, James' eyes landed on the back seat where he saw that there were 2 large buckets. His eyes widened as he looked closer. After rubbing his eyes slightly, he felt his mouth water at the sight of 2 large buckets filled to the brim with crispy, golden chicken. His stomach grumbled even louder. The inside of the car was like a sauna, and James realized that this was Jarvis's way of keeping the food warm and fresh. He couldn't help but smile at the thoughtfulness of his AI assistant, as Jarvis had turned the temperature all the way up to keep the food from going cold and soggy. The scent of the chicken was so tantalizing that James felt like he could almost taste it in his mouth. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, savoring the aroma. His stomach growled again, aching with hunger. He felt weak and dizzy, as he felt his hunger get amplified by the smell. James approached the back seat of the car with caution, keeping the food in his eyesight the entire time, afraid that the food might disappear into thin air if he made a wrong move. He carefully opened the door slowly and peered inside, seeing not only the buckets of chicken but an array of other mouth-watering foods and drinks. He couldn't believe his luck. He was starving and here was a feast laid out before him, all thanks to the consideration of Jarvis. James could imagine it wouldn't have been the easiest task for Jarvis to get this food from the restaurant, as there was nobody actually driving the car, so it must have been a really awkward and weird transaction, as Jarvis must have asked the restaurant worker to put the food into the back of a car with no driver yet a voice. James sat down on the floor. He couldn't help but feel like a ravenous animal, ready to pounce on its prey. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the food containers against his skin. He could hear his heart beating in his chest, and his mouth watered in anticipation of the first bite. As he exhaled a breath, James's eyes flung open as he stared at the chicken like a wild beast. James' eyes had never been sharper, and he began devouring the chicken and fried along with the drinks. As he exhaled the breath, James's eyes flung open as he stared at the buckets of fried chicken before him. His eyes glinted with a fervor that could only be described as ravenous. In that moment, he was no longer James, but a wild beast with one goal: to devour the food before him. He tore into the chicken with a ferocity that would make a lion blush, savoring each succulent bite. The other food items and drinks were not spared either, as James consumed them with reckless abandon. I would continue to go into a detailed description of just how James devoured the food, but that would not be the most appropriate thing to read, so I am gonna save your guys' imagination and skip that part too. After what felt like a good hour of eating for James, he was left feeling as full as a balloon that's about to pop. Jarvis, when is the delivery for the materials gonna arrive? As a matter of fact, sir, it has already arrived, Jarvis said as James had a smile grow on his face as he stood up full of energy, ready to tackle all of the challenges that would arise in his journey to make this bunker secure against a frog. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, Guess Who is Back, CH-114 Groundbreaking Cooling System. As a matter of fact, sir, it has already arrived, Jarvis said as James had a smile grow on his face as he stood up full of energy, ready to tackle all of the challenges that would arise in his journey to make this bunker secure against a frog. Okay, Jarvis, James said, his laced in anticipation as he looked over to the truck. Will I need to bring the truck? Yes, sir, James nodded, and without wasting a second he quickly began unloading all of the boxes from inside the truck and placing them leaning against the wall inside the bunker. The boxes were placed in bunches by James. All of the parts that were required to create each machine were all grouped together so that it would make the creation of a machine as efficient and effective as possible, as it provided easy access. Once done with all of the organizing, James hopped into the truck and started it up. He exited the bunker soon after the climb upwards, and he swiftly started his journey towards his shack. As he drove peacefully down the horrible terrain, James remembered the calls he had received. Jarvis called Principal Weems, James said as he was curious as to why she had called him. His best guess was that he had not returned to the school yet. Yes, sir, dialing, Jarvis said as the phone rang for a few seconds before it was picked up, and Principal Weems' voice came through it. Good morning, James. Principal Weems greeted him with a lack of emotion from her voice as she continued. I tried to reach you earlier, but it seems you must have been busy, James chuckled. Yeah, it's been a busy day, he admitted. It seems like everything decided to happen all at once. Yes, I did hear. Doesn't your family live in Los Angeles? She asked as I heard her tone soften slightly. Yes, they do. I see. I apologize. Hope they were not too affected by the tornado. My best wishes to them. Thank you. I will let them know, I said as I was wondering whether this was the only reason Principal Weems had called. Now, I just wanted to inform you about Outreach Day. It has been moved up to day after tomorrow, so if you can come, I would appreciate it. I see. I will definitely look into it, I said half-heartedly, not really interested in the prospect of going there. I was busy with creating my machines first, so I would probably not be going. I have already permanently altered the plot of Wednesday by telling her everything, so by the end of the Outreach Day, I will get the points either way, so there was no really need for me to go. I thought as the call cut and I continued driving. The fresh air filled my lungs, and I felt a sense of calm wash over me. But in the back of my mind, I knew that my work was waiting for me, and I couldn't afford to lose focus and time by going to the Outreach Day. At best, I will ask Wednesday to refrain from some of the events she is gonna do. When I arrived at the shack, I was greeted by a sight that filled me with anticipation. Large wooden boxes were scattered around the area, each one attached to a parachute. I knew that these were the materials I had ordered, and my excitement grew as I approached them. With practice ease, I quickly got to work and I began to loaf the boxes and remove the parachutes. The materials inside were heavy as they were special metals in large amounts. It also seems that they also had been airdropped from a great height. As I lifted and stacked the boxes, I felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that I was one step closer to building the new and improved frequency pulsar. As I was driving, I took in a deep breath of the crisp, refreshing air, feeling invigorated by its cool touch. The gentle breeze ruffled through my hair, carrying the sweet scent of pine and damp earth. The cool air filling my lungs was a much-needed relief from the stuffy confines of my lab. My mind was abuzz with excitement as I drove towards the bunker, where I would finally put my plan into action. With a surge of confidence, I reminded myself of the groundbreaking plan I had been working on tirelessly. I had finally found the perfect blend of tungsten alloys with additions of rhenium, hafnium, or tantalum that could withstand the scorching heat of the frequency pulsar. However, I knew that I needed to increase the lifespan and conductivity of the system, and that's why I had decided to add the king of all materials, diamonds. I couldn't contain my excitement as I thought about the wonders of diamonds. Not only are they the hardest material known to man, but they also boast of exceptional thermal conductivity that would keep the frequency pulsar cool even in the hottest of temperatures. The durability of diamonds was unmatched, and they were the perfect fit for my cooling system. I grinned to myself as I thought about the master plan that would revolutionize the world of cooling systems if it ever got out. Adding copper to the diamond mixture would increase the lifespan of the system, and aluminum would double its heat conductivity. With this new and improved system, the frequency pulsar would run for years on end without any issues. As I drove towards the bunker, I couldn't help but think about how people often underestimated the value of diamonds. But to me, they were worth their weight in gold. I had ordered 2 large boxes of diamonds and was ready to spare no expense in bringing my plan to life. The rugged terrain leading up to the bunker was a challenge that the truck had to overcome, but it was a beast of a machine and pushed on, impressing me with its strength and durability once again. Chapter 117, an upgrade that's long overdue. Once I had got back inside the bunker, without wasting a second I rolled up my sleeves, got to work building the cooling for the frequency pulsar machine, carefully piecing together the intricate cooling system. It was a much more complicated process than I had initially expected, but after working on it for 2 hours I had ended up with the end result. Finally, I stood back and gazed with pride at my handiwork. The cooling system was flawless, and I knew that it was exactly what a machine needed to function at its peak performance. The machine was bigger, but I didn't mind that as I had no other choice, as I knew I had to sacrifice the size of it for the heavy-duty cooling system to make sure that the machine performs at peak performance at all times. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary to achieve perfection of a machine. I plugged it up and activated it. The green light flickered on, brightly shining as the air in front of the different wall began to quickly distort rapidly, almost as if it had come to life. The dust in front of the wall started swirling away from the distortion's area of range back. It was a breathtaking sight, and I could feel myself becoming more and more mesmerized by the second, even if I was seeing this a second time. "Jarvis, increase the range," I shouted, wanting to see if it will hold up as the constantly changing patterns were just beginning to form in the air. I watched as the patterns in the air began to shift and change as it grew larger, becoming more complex and intricate by the second. It was a sight to behold, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride at my creation. I stood away from the machine as I quietly watched as the distortion grew larger and larger until it was barely stretching towards the wall. The dust in the room began to gather in a line, unable to cross the barrier that the machine had created. I stood there in silence as I watched the temperature readings and other readings for what felt like hours, carefully monitoring mainly the machine's heat gather up, and to my happiness, the cooling system was working just as I had intended it. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me as I stood there admiring my handiwork in full display of its abilities. "JARVIS, officially begin the creation of frequency pulsar V2, I said as I watched as JARVIS, with its mechanical arms that I had built, began the mass production of the machine. It was an amazing sight to see, and I felt a surge of pride knowing that I was responsible for creating such an impressive piece of technology. Without having to use the system at all. I personally stood and cracked my body with some satisfying pops as I walked towards the first batch of boxes I had unloaded and arrived in front of a rather large small group of boxes in comparison to the other groups of boxes. The group in front of me was like no other, containing the necessary components to create the amazing machine I had in mind. Carefully, I opened the boxes and began to place the objects outside of the box, preparing to build the machine that would change the game for me. With each piece I took out and placed, my anticipation grew. I was building something truly remarkable, and I wanted it to be perfect as was building it for a special someone, who'd been there since the beginning keeping me alive from my stupid decisions. As I worked, my mind raced with the endless possibilities of what this machine could achieve. As I was working on that, I took a glance over at the arms only to see that the arms had already created one frequency pulsar in a matter of 5 minutes. I swallowed visibly as I was shocked Jarvis's incredible speed, and I glanced around, and my eyes landed on the semi-truck. "Jarvis, who did you buy the semi-truck from, sir?" The semi-truck was purchased by a baby technological vehicle company called Tesla. This was a prototype which I had purchased from the owner for a high price of $2 million. This purchase of an company prototype was only possible due to the owner of Tesla currently being at very low point in the company's financials and is on the steady march to the brink of bankruptcy. My ears perked up when I heard Tesla and its problem. I knew that in 2008 Elon Musk did face this issue of financial bankruptcy, but that was due to the 2009 housing crash that is gonna happen, which I assume is when Tesla truly hit rock bottom. I thought about it for a while, but moved on with what I was building as currently that was more important, and I knew the owner of Tesla would be able to successfully bounce back. I continued to build the machine I was working on for a good hour, before turning around again and seeing that Jarvis had ended up building 30 frequency pulsars. I decided to stop working on the machine and switch of the first V2 frequency pulsar I made that was still successfully running without an issue and placed the machines along with the noise suppressor pad at my opening to the base, covering all of them. This included air vents, main gateway and other openings that were covered up in about an hour. I activated the machine and they were all activated to the max range. Inspecting one more time I saw the machines successfully doing their jobs, and I decided to hand the work of observing them to Jarvis as I resumed my work on the machine. The machine I was creating was a new real supercomputer for Jarvis. I had realized that running Jarvis on a laptop was just not gonna cut it, as it didn't have the ability to do a lot of things at once, for example, or had late response speeds in bad weather conditions and such other issues that may or have already arose. I was gonna build a real supercomputer with immense processing power beyond anything possible currently or even decades in the future. The new cooling system is a core part in its success in being so monstrous, as that is added as well to keep everything working extremely well, making this build a complete reality. Chapter 118, Destination Set, Nevermore High. I had my work cut out for me, and this time I decided to build the computer with some breaks in the middle where I rested my mind, and also ate food to replenish my body. I repeated this throughout the day. After nearly 10 hours of working, I had finally accomplished the creation of the supercomputer. With a tired yet satisfied sigh escaping my lips, I had completed work on the machine completely. As I plugged in the supercomputer, a sense of anticipation and excitement filled me. I eagerly awaited the moment when I could finally turn it on and see it come to life. Glancing at the clock, I realized that it was already 7 p.m. I yawned, realizing how exhausted I was, but I knew I had to finish the job. I plugged in the messy wires, promising myself to fix them later, and waited for the computer to come to life. "Jarvis, my friend, are you ready?" I asked with a smile as I tapped the sleek surface of the supercomputer. To my surprise, Jarvis replied with a genuine excitement in its voice, "Yes sir, I am ready." It was almost as if Jarvis was waiting for me, eagerly anticipating the moment when it could finally get an upgrade from the laptop. With a smile, I entered a few lines of code and entered the USB with a part of JARVIS source code. A loading bar appeared as JARVIS's voice rang out, initializing transfer of main consciousness. The voice was lacking JARVIS's accent and was purely robotic. ARM control and frequency pulsar transferred to subsidiary system, ELO. The voice rang out before going silent for a second before ELO's familiar voice rang out. How may I be of assistance to you, sir? ELO, I need your assistance in building the unloading deck for my Mark 6 armor, I said with a slight nod. I would be happy to assist you in your building, ELO said as I got to unpacking the items. I did not know the amount of time it would take for JARVIS to fully complete the transfer and integrate, but I wasn't about to wait and find out, I thought as I began building the unloading deck. I worked for a few hours on it. It was a rather quick procedure as ELO already had a blueprint of exactly what needed to be done, so it assisted me with no problem. I took my time to make sure that everything was perfect, double-checking my work at every step. It was important to me that the unloading deck was flawless or else there would be a big problem re-equipping this armor. I had a new idea for the unloading deck, something that would make it even more useful. I added a cleaning option, which would thoroughly clean the armor after battles. It took me almost 4 hours to install the feature, but it was worth it. I knew that this would make the armor maintenance process much easier and more efficient. It took a whole other 2 hours to install the unloading deck into the ground, but it was done. With a contented smile, I stepped onto the footprint on the deck as my armor slowly began to unpeel itself from my body. It started from my foot, freeing it and made its way up to the head and finally, the entire armor was taken off me after wearing it for days. My body felt light as I hopped around a bit and moved my arms freely. Satisfied, I took a deep whiff of the air and immediately started gagging. It was a smell worse than anything I had ever smelled before. Swiftly moving my hand, I closed my nose and whipped my head around, looking for the source of that smell, but didn't find anything that could give off such a distinct and powerful smell. It took me a few seconds, but I soon realized that the smell was not coming from something. Rather, it was coming from me. Repulsed by the smell, I quickly ran to the second floor to hopefully find a shower that worked. Thankfully, I soon found a room that looked very grand and exquisite, with beautifully designed wooden floors and a well-ventilated room with a really comfy-looking bed. In a rush, I quickly entered the washroom and turned the shower on with my hopes raised to the roof. The shower thankfully didn't disappoint my high hopes as warm crystal-clear water came flowing out of it. Excited, I jumped in and took a long, relaxing shower. Once I had done that, I exited the washroom feeling completely relaxed. I wore the robe and plopped down on the bed as I drifted off to sleep, determining that I had to go to Nevermore High for the outreach day. The next day, I awoke feeling relaxed and comfortable. I felt like I had just had the best damn sleep of my life. I lazily got up and asked JARVIS what the time was, still half asleep. Sir, it's me ELO and it's 8 a.m., ELO said as I suddenly became wide awake and stood up quickly, realizing that I was about an hour late. I quickly rushed out of the room and threw on some spare Nevermore uniform that I always keep in the car and hit the accelerator as I recklessly drove down the mountains and onto the roads. Luckily, Nevermore, although being 2 hours away from LA, unfortunately, was only 3 hours from the underground bunker. But I wasn't going to let that time stop me as I recklessly drove through the roads, burning past cars, definitely causing a few jump scares along the way and honks along the way. Chapter 119, Outreach Day. Soon I had made it to Jericho Town's entrance and I entered the town. I saw students walking around, some crossing the streets while others entering the shops. I had to drive slow in the area, else I would attract the attention of the sheriff, so all I could really do to ease my boredom was to observe the town and its people. Some residents of Jericho Town were hanging up posters of Pilgrim World, with Joseph Crackstone in the front picture. All of the students on the sidewalks were really excited as they explored the city along with their friends. However, I noticed that some of the townspeople didn't have the most pleasant expressions seeing all of the Nevermore students happily walking around their town. I drove past a familiar shop called Uriah's Heap where I saw Enid and the boy whose name I could not remember talking to an old lady, and their expression showed nothing but disgust and grossness, which caused me have a good laugh as I continued driving. Eventually driving by the statue of Joseph Crackstone, and the mayor in his gray trench coat staring at the statue, with the chief nowhere to be seen. I slowed the car down as I noticed one of the people who were putting up the Pilgrim World posters on the walls of the buildings climb down the ladder and start walking towards another location with a bag of posters on his back. Sir, I shouted to attract his attention, and him reacting to my shout, he turned around and saw me. He had a confused expression as he looked at me in my uniform before looking at the car, and he just stood there observing me for a good second before he walked closer to the car. "How can I help you?" he said with a smile to show his friendliness. "How do I get to Pilgrim Town?" I asked him. He seemed to have gotten excited when I mentioned Pilgrim Town, and he started pointing out the directions I had to go to get to Pilgrim Town. I thanked him and was about to drive off before he spoke again, causing me to stop. "Aren't you too young to drive, son?" he said as he stared at me in my car again. I simply smiled at him and told him that I had the permissions necessary and took off, leaving him in the dust as I made my way to a little bit of an outskirt part of the town before I reached what seemed to have been walls or fences made out of wood. I drove ahead a bit more, and after a turn I looked at the wooden fence with a sign saying Pilgrim World, and I knew I was in the right place. I parked my car in line with the other cars, and even a bus parked in front of Pilgrim Town, and exited the car. I started walking towards the entrance of the town, when all of a sudden, the principal appeared standing in front of Pilgrim Town gate with a smile as she held a small bag with both her arms. "So good to see you finally attend, Mr. James." I was caught a slight bit of off guard but quickly recovered with a chuckle. "Yes, it's been a while as I have had to do many things and still have things I need to do. It's just that today is such a special event that I knew I had to attend it," I said with a smile. The principal was quiet for a while before pointed behind me and spoke. "Quite a flashy vehicle for someone who still can't drive," she said, causing me to look back and see my black Audi standing out like a sore thumb, besides all of the basic old-looking cars. I clenched my teeth in awkwardness as I looked towards her in silence. "Unfortunately, you missed the announcement. No matter, please participate in the events of the Pilgrim Town, and have a lovely time here," she said as she walked away. I felt relief wash over me as I really didn't want to bother with explaining it to her, I thought as I walked in. I observed the old-looking houses all around me, and as I was walking I saw this crazy old man shouting "Welcome to Pilgrim World," which trails every day. The old man shouted as a few tourist couples who were walking by him flinched away, causing a laugh out of me seeing that happen as I continued walking deeper into the old town. I saw students taking pictures with a cutout of Joseph Crackstone with funny faces and giggling at the pictures of themselves with their friends. Walking a bit deeper I saw a group of students gathered around a ginger-haired woman in an old dress talking to the student. From the sounds of it, she was an introduction guide, and she was talking about fudge and how it is the lifeblood of their humble community, whilst holding a tray of similar old-looking clothes. Looking closer at the group I saw familiar students such as Bianca and her friends and Wednesday standing beside Eugene as they were listening to the lady talk about fudge in Old English language. She told everybody to grab a pair of uniform and to make their forefathers proud by selling fudge, which I didn't quite understand but went with the flow and watched from afar. I hung around for a few minutes looking at the other buildings and the house where items that really belonged to Joseph Crackstone were kept. In the end I ended up back to the old fugery shop with students out in the front holding trays of fudge. I walked inside where I saw Wednesday holding a tray of fudge with a bunch of tourists in front of her speaking fluent Russian. I knew Russian so I understood clearly what she was saying while none of the tourists understood it. She was completely roasting this place and did not forget to add that fudge was not invented for another 256 years and then extended the tray forward ending it with "any takers" in Russian. The tourists, confused, just said no and started walking away, leaving Wednesday. As the crowd started walking away, I raised my hands from behind them and spoke in Russian. "I would like to try some of this fudge that will go to fund this pathetic whitewashing of American history," I said, copying her words with a smile as I walked towards her and picked up a sample of fudge, taking a bite into it with a smile. Chapter 120, A Vision of Death and Destructive. Wednesday, who didn't know I was there, had a slightly surprised face as she looked at me biting into the fudge. "Very tasty," I said, continuing to speak in Russian. The ginger-haired lady who had brought the students to the fudge factory came into the shop as she saw the tourists leaving with wide eyes, wondering what was happening, and saw me and Wednesday. I noticed I, as well, simply looked back at Wednesday and took another sample, genuinely enjoying the taste of the fudge, although I found it to be a bit big in size. The lady who I had expected to simply leave rather walked towards me and caught my attention. "Hello, students of Nevermore. Were you perhaps assigned to working for this fine establishment today?" the lady asked. "No, unfortunately, I am not assigned here," I said. In reality, I didn't even know where I had been assigned to, as I never really collected the envelope that assigned all of the students due to my late attendance. The lady simply smiled and nodded and walked back out of the shop, leaving me feeling that she was a bit disappointed at my response, but I didn't linger as I turned towards Wednesday. "So, having fun?" I asked with a cheeky little smile on my face, with a slight bit of teasing hidden in my tone. She looked towards me with a small smile back and answered, "Yes, I was before you came." My expression plummeted slightly as I got a little bit salty at her reaction, but I didn't let it bother me too much. "Wanna go out and explore? Maybe even check out the town hall with Crackstone's personal belongings," I said, referring to what she would have done previously. Indeed, I am still a bit curious as to what the personal belongings of Crackstone are. I still find it so absurd that the town and the school's principal have kept up this lie in some false hope of peace, she replied. "Yet, people jump at the prospect of peace, even if it's only a false mirage," I said as Wednesday kept down her tray of fudge, and we started walking out. She reached the door and glanced around to look for the ginger-haired lady, but she was nowhere to be seen, so she walked out of the store followed by me. As I stepped out, Bianca appeared in front of me. "Hey, James. How have you been? I heard about what happened to La. Is your family doing fine?" she said as she got closer to me. I was about to respond, but Wednesday came up beside me and took my arm. "Yes, his family is fine. Now we have somewhere to be," Wednesday said as she and Bianca had a little eye-glaring competition. Eventually, the winner, however, was Wednesday as she never blinks, so Bianca let out a sigh and walked inside the store with her tray. I looked towards Wednesday, who was still holding onto my hand, and spoke. "Was that jealousy?" I asked in a teasing manner as I looked at her, and I saw a slight blush appear on her polished face as I felt her grip loosen. With a smile, I held her hands as I spoke again. "I definitely like this side of you," I said, causing the very slight blush to grow further as she held my hand. Suddenly, her head flung up into the air, and she seemed dazed. I understood what this meant and waited quietly as I began feeling nervous the longer her looking into either my future or past happened, nervously wondering what she was going to see. A few seconds later, she fell down on the floor as she gasped for air, and I felt her grip on my hands tighten as a tear escaped her eyes. Wide-eyed, I bent down and removed the tear that escaped from her eyes as I spoke. "Are you okay?" I said, worried for her, as I picked her up in my arms, causing her to go wide-eyed as I walked towards the exit. From my peripheral vision, I saw her realizing what was happening and tucking her head inside my body to hide her embarrassment, but I didn't bother and made a speedy walk to the car, where I put her inside and sat back into the car. With the doors shut and window chromatic features on so that no one can see what was going on inside, I turned to Wednesday as I spoke first carefully. "Wednesday. What did you see?" I asked, and she looked at me with an expression I could not understand as she began speaking slowly. "I saw death and destruction, buildings set on fire, whole skyscrapers falling down from the skies, crashing onto the streets with people screaming and running around. Some of them were trying to escape while some were trying to save other people," she said as she stopped, and I waited for her to continue. She locked her gaze into mine as she continued. "Worst of all, I saw you bleeding profusely, battling multiple giant machines. Some were on the ground, some were helping you. You were surrounded as you fought, explosions going all around you, and especially a giant red robotic monster with purple eyes slashing towards your head with a massive sword from behind you." She said as she looked towards me again as her tears began to fall freely, and she choked on her words. I brought her in for a hug as I held her tightly in my grasp within my arms as I felt my shirt getting wet. "Nothing like that is going to happen, I'll make sure of it, Wednesday," I said. I could not focus on the fact that Wednesday was crying, but I just couldn't. My mind was racing, thinking about what her vision meant. Giant machines? Just what could that possibly mean? I died in her vision. Chapter 121, Sector 7. I looked towards Wednesday, who had now stopped crying and cleaned away her tears as I spoke again. I had been sitting quietly comforting her for a while now, and she seemed to have gotten better. "Wednesday, now that I know of this, I'm sure such a thing won't come into fruition," I said. Truth be told, right now, I could not even believe the words coming out of my mouth. After all, I know that Wednesday's visions don't lie. Update complete, a voice came from the speakers, causing Wednesday and me to look at each other and then at the car screen. Wednesday was confused as the voice didn't sound like Jarvis, rather, it sounded robotic, and a loading screen appeared on the screen. It showed a little bar loading up. Within a few seconds, the bar was full, and a ding was heard. Initializing, Omega personality, Jarvis, the voice said as another bar appeared. This was a little extra I had added to the code when I was making the supercomputer, something that had been on my mind. I had thought of the possibility of having the actual AI with all of its data and abilities, but what if it had multiple personalities? There was already Elo, but Elo was kind of like a woodwork AI. Now, Elo would also be similar to Jarvis in its speech and thinking capabilities. The important thing here was that I could now systematically add more personalities, and if any personality below Omega tries to go rogue, they will swiftly be taken care of, so I can possibly even make Ultron. On the screen, the loading bar that had fully loaded up compressed and split itself into two white balls that got pushed away and shot back towards the center. It hit itself and exploded as Jarvis's familiar butler voice rang out. "Good afternoon, Sir and Ms. Wednesday. I hope I am not disturbing anything," Jarvis said as it analyzed the fact that we both, who were young teenagers, were shut inside a car whose windows were too chromed out, making it impossible for anyone on the outside to look inside. I looked at Wednesday and saw a slight blush appear on her face as she spoke. "Jarvis, don't speak such nonsense. We were simply talking," she said as she unlocked the door and left. I lay back on the seat feeling exhausted. I felt that today would be a day I could just relax and enjoy, but it's funny how wrong I was. "Sir, since my processing power has increased, I have now discovered a secret government organization. It goes by the name of Sector 7, Jarvis said as I listened quietly. That name seemed to ring a bell in my head, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "Jarvis, break into the database of this organization and discover what they are and their secrets. Do not interfere with their activities," I said. I didn't want to raise any alarms with Sector 7, as it was clearly a much more powerful organization under the government to be able to hide from Jarvis before. Well, it couldn't hide anymore. I kept feeling like I knew what or who Sector 7 was, but again, I failed to put a finger on it. "Sir, the defenses of Sector 7 are tough. It may take me a while to break into it, so I recommend you go and enjoy the event held by Nevermore today, sir." "Enjoy," I said as I laughed a little and shut my eyes. "Right now, I just want some rest," I said as I leaned and decided to take a quick nap. "Jarvis, wake me up when you crack in," I said before I took a short nap. It was a peaceful nap, and I was enjoying the serenity in my mind when I heard muffled beeps that grew louder and louder. My eyes flew open, and I felt slightly annoyed, but I soon brushed it off by rubbing my eyes. "Hello, sir. It's been half an hour since you took your nap, and I'd like to inform you that I have successfully hacked into the Sector 7 database. Sector 7 is an agency responsible for investigating extraterrestrial activity on Earth, and it has a long history of dealing with non-biological extraterrestrials or NBES, which are alien robot-like beings too. There are two current records, megas and classified. They are giant robotic beings, and one of them is currently being held, dubbed as NBE-01. It's a mega, according to them, and has been frozen on Earth for hundreds of years," Jarvis said, finally stopping. I was left sitting as the pieces fell into place in my mind. The giant robots that I battled might have been the Transformers, I realized. As I came to this understanding, I also realized that the purple glowing eyes that Wednesday mentioned couldn't be Transformer eyes, as there was never a purple-eyed Transformer in the first movie. I assumed that the first movie was the one they were referring to since people other than Sector 7 didn't know about the Transformers and the ensuing battle in none other than the financial district of LA, California. Luckily, that was far from the suburbs where my family lived, so they were safe. For Jarvis, search for a person named Sam Witwicky and also keep an eye out for a user going by Ladiesman217 on eBay. Let me know immediately when the user posts anything related to old glasses. I didn't really have a plan in mind at that moment, so I was just making it up as I went. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to intervene anymore, now that I knew what Wednesday had seen. What I did know was that I needed stronger suit armor. I opened up the system, and my eyes landed on the embarrassing number of points I had. At that moment, I remembered that I had spent the points to get some clues about the fourth Todink bra. Chapter 122, Notice for a New Fanfiction. Hey guys, I am wondering what type of fanfic you would like to read next. In which world would you like it to be? Leave an answer in the comments section. I want to know what you all want. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, The End of the Statue. I got out of the car and decided to just get through the events of the day, even though I didn't feel like it anymore. However, I knew that Wednesday was not quite alright, so I walked into Pilgrim Town. I looked around and saw that Eugene was getting bullied by 3 kids, and he had just thrown up all the chocolate fudge he had eaten. On the other hand, Wednesday was nowhere to be found. With a sigh escaping my lips, I walked over to Eugene. "Hey. Leave him alone," I said as I got closer and saw one of the boys putting Eugene in a head-and-hand lock machine. One that caught their attention. The boy who was about to smack the wood shut looked at me for a second before a smirk appeared on his lips. He used all his strength to push down the plank. Seeing this, I reacted quickly, arriving and stopping the wood plank from shutting. A little bit of frustration appeared on his face from the little smirk he had. He pressed harder, and I felt his strength clash against mine. However, I pushed back, overpowering him and pushing the wood plank back. He stumbled backward. He pointed towards me and angrily shouted, "What the hell is your problem, dude?" Not really wanting to entertain him, I just quietly stared at his other 2 friends, wondering if they were going to do anything for a few seconds before they both raised their hands up slightly in surrender. "Listen, we don't want any problems," one of the boys said. He was also the son of the city mayor. He looked towards the boy who had stumbled back with an apologetic face. "Sorry, men, I can't get into any more trouble with these freaks, or my dad will kill me," the son of the city mayor said. Now, it would only be fair for me to get angry at what he called me, but right now, I couldn't care less. I had bigger problems to think about. The 3 boys who had gone quiet for a second decided to just walk away, and I let them go as I looked down at Eugene, whose face was covered in brown fudge with Luke stains on the white part of the pilgrim dress. I picked him up and got him standing. He looked up at me and said, "Thank you for helping me." I was actually kind of grossed out by how he was right now, so I didn't say much. "It's fine, Eugene. I guess be more careful next time," I said as I started walking away. "Wait, I really want to thank you," he said once again, so I looked back at him with a smile. "That's fine. You're welcome," I said as I started walking away again. Wait, he said once again, causing me to get slightly annoyed as I turned back. "What is it?" I asked. He seemed to have gotten startled by that and started stuttering slightly before he spoke again. "That was the first time anyone has helped me." "Okay," I said, feeling as what he said was done, but he continued. "You also know my name, which no one usually cares about. So, I just want to really thank you," he said as I let out a slight sigh as I turned with a smile. "Don't worry about it. Just take care of yourself," I said as I handed him a spare napkin I had in my pocket. "And clean yourself up," I said as I handed him my spare napkin. He simply nodded with a happy smile and walked away. With a nod towards him, I also proceeded to walk away to the main museum of Crackstone. I arrived smoothly and noticed that the lock had not been broken, so I knew Wednesday had definitely not been here. I started walking around, wondering where she was when I eventually stumbled upon the fudge store. There, I saw Bianca giving me the stink eye, trying to ignore me. I looked around and found Wednesday inside the store. She was holding a tray of fudge, speaking to a group of tourists who all had confused looks on their faces. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I already knew she wasn't speaking English. She seemed to be doing fine, entertaining herself. With a smile, I quietly walked away and reached the entrance. I proceeded to exit the Pilgrim Town and entered my car. I started it up and drove away from Pilgrim Town, passing through the streets of Jericho Town. I burned past a restaurant where I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Thornhill talking to the city mayor and Principal Weems. I also saw the Crackstone statue and wondered what I should do with it. In the end, I decided to simply place an F-bomb beside it. I drove a bit away from the restaurant until I was out of sight in a remote place. I quietly snuck up on the statue of Crackstone and attached the F-bomb to it. I ordered Jarvis to ward off Wednesday if she came to set fire to the statue and blow it up when the music is playing during the speech. Meanwhile, at the dinner, Principal Weems and everyone else noticed a black car zipping past them. The city mayor and Mrs. Thornhill promptly got out of the car, but Principal Weems had her head in her hands with a tired look. "One Principal Weems, is anything the matter?" the mayor asked, wondering if he had said something by accident. But Principal Weems quickly recovered as she smiled. "There's nothing to worry about. I was just thinking about something," she said, and the mayor visibly relaxed as he chuckled. "If that's the case, then do tell me what's bothering you. I would be more than happy to help you sort it out," I appreciate the offer, but I am sure I can handle this, Principal Weems said. James, on the other hand, had just finished planting the F-bomb and started driving away from Jericho Town. Chapter 124, The System Has Another Voice? Once James planted the F-bomb, he quietly snuck out of there once again, making sure to give Jarvis the proper instructions, and got into his car. He started once again slowly driving his way out of town. Soon he made it to Jericho Town's gates. With a sigh he exited the place. The drive ahead would last a few hours, so he got about lost in his thoughts, the silence of the car only aiding him slowly getting lost in his thoughts as he drove out of Jericho Town and drove down the forest road. He glanced around as he accelerated and started zipping by the trees in silence and peacefulness. He felt a sense of serenity within himself, but then he remembered Wednesday's vision, and he had a feeling that this peacefulness would not last. According to Wednesday's vision, he was out to die. He thought to himself, since I know about it now I can change it, but deep down he himself had a feeling that he couldn't fight against whatever was to come. I can't accept that, he said to himself aloud. Accept what, sir? Jarvis asked, confused. James shot caught surprised by Jarvis, but he quickly composed himself. Forget about it, okay sir, as you wish, Jarvis responded before it went silent again. James' eyes looked towards the road as he tightened his handle on the steering wheel, and a look of determination appeared within his eyes. He stepped on pedal and the car accelerated to higher speeds than before as it quietly zipped through the roads it came upon, almost like Black Phantom. His heart and will now lit up like a fire. But that couldn't be said to be the same for his brain. He couldn't come with an actual solution to his problem. He couldn't think of anything as a matter of fact. There was nothing that passed through his head. James sat there with an empty head, at one point even started considering whether he was lied to by the system. But he quickly removed that thought as he clearly had many things to show for, thanks to the IQ. Frustrated, he decided to turn on the radio, something he couldn't remember ever doing in the car, just to sort of freshen his mind up. The radio started with a song that James had once heard his dad listening to. It seemed to have started in the middle of the song, and since he was curious, he decided to listen. Face to face, out in the heat, one hanging tough, staying hungry, they stack the odds till we take to the street, for the kill with the skill to survive. James seemed to have caught to the beat as he started mumbling the lyrics as he remembered from his memory. It's the eye of the tiger, it's the thrill of the fight rising up to the challenge of our rival, and the last known survivor stalks his prey in the night. Excited and all hyped up, he was now singing the song as he remembered the lyrics and the name of the song, and he was loving it. And he's watching us all with the eye of the tiger. James sang out loud with passion. Rising up straight to the top, had the guts, got the glory, went the distance. Now I'm not going to stop, just a man in his will to survive. It's the eye of the tiger, it's the thrill of the fight rising up to the challenge of our rival, and the last known survivor stalks his prey in the night, and he's watching us all with the eye of the tiger. James sang out loud as the song came to an end and he shut the radio satisfied. With a relaxed smile he continued driving as his thought went back to the song as he started mumbling the catch tune and singing the lyrics in his head. Da-dum, dub, da-da-dum, dum, da-da-dud. Rising up to the challenge of our rival, and the last known survivor stalks his prey in the night. And he's watching us all with the eye of the tiger. He sang with a laugh. He felt motivated and his mind felt clearer, his thoughts now begging to flow much smoothly. He felt like the only way for him to quickly improve would only be to finish the SSS serum or build a new pair of armor by himself. It took a while, but as James drove he was wondering what he should, and if he picked the choice of improving the armor, just what he could improve. He arrived at the underground bunker and decided to open up a blueprint board. Jarvis, open the structure for the Mark 6 armor, James said, and the Mark 6 armor formed with holographic design in a 3D shape. James kept looking at the armor, moving it around, opening parts of it, and kept looking for what he could improve, but he couldn't figure it out. He needed to create an armor, or even multiple armors, that would be able to fight, and even defeat the Autobots, or Decepticons. After a while of no ideas he stopped himself and had a thought. Why? Why should I interfere? Because if you don't you won't gain points, and if that happens you won't become stronger, the system said, attempting to remove his self-doubt, but it was not as effective as the system had hoped. System, what if I don't want to? What if I am happy where I am? Sure, the Todd Ink Bros exist, but I'm sure that if I just stop making more Todd Ink Bros, I will be fine. The frog's initial issue was I was making Todd Ink Bros. Todd Ink Bros definitely shows something, and as for the frog, I already know how to defeat the frog. I thought as I got a flashback to the backyard with the frog there when I had shot my lasers at the frog and it dodged easily. I knew how to defeat it. No, rather he hoped that he was right in his theory. So system? Why? He thought as he waited quietly, getting no response from the system. He waited for a while with no response. System, hello James, a voice rang out in his head. It was a different voice. James felt like it came from the system, but he was confused. He even found the voice to be familiar. I am Tony Stark, the creator of this system. 8. Chapter 125, Tony Stark's Message. I am Tony Stark, the creator of this system. The different yet somewhat familiar voice rang out loud in my mind. My eyes widened in shock and my brain froze for a second. Tony Stark? You mean the Tony Stark, like the actual Tony freaking Stark? I asked, as my voice started getting progressively louder the more I spoke. Sir, is something the matter? Jarvis asked me, once again, sounding worried as this was the second time I had done this today. No, nothing. Don't worry about it, I said as I stared at the screen, exiting my daze with a hand wave to gesture that it was nothing. Jarvis went quiet for a while longer but spoke soon after. All right sir, I'll be here if you need any assistance. Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks, Jarvis, I said dismissively. Okay, sir, Jarvis replied, but I wasn't paying attention to Jarvis anymore as I was focusing on what was going to happen next. There was, however, once again a period of silence when nothing happened. Yes, I know it is me, the voice of Tony Stark presumably laughed. The Tony Stark. Genius, billionaire, playboy, and philanthropist one. It's nice to finally talk to you, my successor, or so I would say. But you see, this is merely just a voice recording left by me to you. What? I asked confused, by what he meant by successor. Yes, I know. A big what, am I right? But unfortunately, I couldn't personally speak to you due to, well, some unforeseen circumstances that appeared upon your birth. 1. I got excited at the prospect of finding out more things related to my birth would be incredible. Wait, tell me more. Before I could finish saying anything the voice cut me off and continued. But that's for another day. I let out a sigh of disappointment hearing that this voice message was the only voice message I could record to you, you see, so I decided to make this special and only to be heard upon special circumstances, which seem to be right now as you are hearing this. Haha. He continued, and I smiled a bit, listening to him. He let out a sigh as he spoke. This world. It was not what I had thought it to be when I had brought you here, no, when we had come here. This place is rigged with unimaginable dangers. This place is like a ticking time bomb. But unfortunately for you, kid, there's nowhere else to run to at your convenience right now. And I'm sure Tao wouldn't run leaving everything behind. So the only choice left is to defuse the bomb. One now. I know what kind of person you were in your past life, but not how you are in your new life. You know, when we had come here together, I planned on raising you to be my successor even as my son, but it seems that fate didn't like that. I was quiet as I listened to his voice, feeling all kinds of emotions, confusion, curiosity, and even a bit of fear. Sigh, I want to apologize for that little rant of mine. I just hope that you grew up in a good family and met good people. Think about them. Get stronger for them if not for yourself. Even if you are satisfied, they are still in danger because you are strong enough. One, so get stronger, use everything to your advantage, use your own brains and figure it out. And, oh, don't forget Jarvis. He was a great right-hand man that helped in all of my new projects. Haha. This is the one and only message I have for you. If you make it out alive, I would love to meet the new you, James. His voice began to slowly fade away as he said his last few words, disappearing, and I was left feeling a little empty inside as I felt his voice disappear. I did not want him to go, I thought as I put my hands on my chest when he spoke to me. It felt warm, like a warm and cozy blanket wrapped all around me. I felt connected to him, a connection I didn't know existed. It felt unbreakable, stronger than any bond I had ever felt. And the feeling of its disappearance had left behind nothing but emptiness. With quietness and nothing going through my head, I sat there for a few seconds as I took in everything he told me. It was weird, and I hope I get to genuinely meet him, I thought as I got out of my daze and looked around, seeing the same screen of the armor's 3D model. But this time it was clearer, rather my mind felt clearer. Jarvis, help me design a new armor, I said as I cracked my knuckles, ready to begin this project. We will be designing multiple armors today, Jarvis. Yes, sir, I will be more than happy to help, Jarvis responded with enthusiasm as I gave a little nod and started typing something on the holographic keyboard. Previously I had asked Jarvis to build a holographic table, the same one that had gotten lost in the tornado. This was done when I had gone to the outreach day. So by the time I got back, the table was already set up with a chair I had also purchased, but I preferred standing right now. The first thing I began to type was 3 names, Starscream, Blackout, and Bumblebee. 3 Now personally, Bumblebee was my favorite character from the movies as I watched when I was young, and I found him to be a really cool character. 1 But hey, I don't want any problems. This is reality, and I need to be able to defend myself if the situation were to ever arise and Bumblebee attacked me. 1. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.